partner, let alone all the traffic from this new development coming on. When you have Renault Road, that would be a more ideal place for the entering and exiting for this development. At a certain point, Renault Road to the west of Percival will be a ghost town. There will be no outside commuter traffic once the new Brian Coburn plan is complete. There will be no issue with the new residents to have them to make a left turn on Renault, as it will no longer be the busy road that we know. It will just be the current residents of the neighborhood and those few streets around Joshua using the Renault at that laneway. I've noticed in the storm management and servicing report that they indicated that the number of persons per unit would be 2.7. I find that figure ridiculous. If anything, that would be the bottom of the range. There is no accuracy where this exists in real life in this area. The new cabin development to the east of us is mainly townhomes. If you take a walk through this neighborhood, which is not even complete yet, you will notice there are multi-generational families living in these homes. This would translate to additional cars and parking on our streets. Townhome subdivisions are notorious for having cars strewn along the street at all hours of the day. This neighborhood and the cabin neighborhood that's newly developed are no exception. The stretch of road across the street from us is used at present, additional parking on occasion for those in this area. No one has abused it for long-term parking as of yet, but I believe this meeting today is only for the two stack units, but I do believe at some point this will be an issue for the parking once that additional area for parking is removed across the street from us. The lack of parking for the new units is not enough or the lack of parking will be considerable issue for us because—
Sorry, Ms. Kelleher, you are at time, so if you could just quickly wrap up, please.
Okay, so basically I would just say that it's going to create a parking problem for all the streets in the area, and it's going to be on the residents to call bylaw, which would cause adversaries between the neighbors. So I understand the need for additional units to this area, and the lot across the street from us makes perfect sense, but you're trying to put a new development in an area that's not conforming to what is currently on the street. So you're trying to put a Renault Road property onto a residential street, and it just doesn't fit. And we're in disagreement with the current proposal as it is. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much. Do we have any questions for the delegate? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here today. We will move on to the next one. Daniel Kelleher.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. I didn't realize that I had the power to unmute myself. Okay. All right, I'll try to make this quick because I see Laura just got cut off. So, okay, so upon the receipt of the recent zoning application, our family has been greatly disturbed. We're the original owners of this property. It's a low density, it's safe based on the abutting zoning. We thought this would never change. Our house is our only investment, and we'll do whatever we can to protect the value. The proposed site across the street is going to greatly affect this. This proposal would greatly decrease our property's enjoyment, privacy, and value. The current proposal is to erect 26 units across the street, where right now there's just 2 houses located there. The proposal was made from an out-of-province developer who appears to have absolutely no ties with this area, and he just wants to maximize the profits by putting as many units on this site. The proposal will erect 26 units across the street. When I purchased my house, I stood in line, like Laura had mentioned earlier. We waited overnight. We paid extra because we wanted to have the frontage of the trees across the street. And we knew at the time we purchased it, it had RH zoning, which only allowed a single family home for each property. And this current proposal I find is unacceptable, is that both affects my property, and I know it's going to affect the value. As being a senior property assessor for 28 years, I know how these nuisances impact property values. The major concern I have is the removal of the 30 centimeter reserve from Ziegler Street. This was intended to protect Ziegler Street from Renault property. The homeowners who purchased Bellcraft Homes are the ones who funded Ziegler Street. So the people that bought in this subdivision are the ones that created Ziegler Street. There would be no Ziegler Street if we didn't purchase the houses on Ziegler Street. And now Landrick, the new developer, is trying to take advantage of this street where they have put no investment in. The purchased Renault property, like the previous owner, the previous owner had no rights, who owned Renault property had no rights to access Ziegler Street, nor should this new developer. Based on the current state of the real estate market, I doubt that this project will even go ahead to fruition. Developers have slowed down that developers have slowed down, and due to the low homeowner demand and high building costs, I don't think that it's going to go as smoothly as expected. I have a feeling that what's going to happen is if the zoning goes through, they're going to clear cut this property across the street, get their zoning changed, and then they're going to be able to turn around and sell it for a profit. This is something that happened over in Kyvan at the corner of Paget and Navin Road. The developer got R5 zoning for a multi-story condominium and then turned around and listed it at a very high price. I have a fear that this is what's going to happen. And again, the thing is when you upset the apple cart, it's affecting the quality of life of other people. But once you go in and clear cut this property, those trees are gone forever. And the city appears that they don't really care. And I know the developer doesn't care, but the people around the area do care. And these are the people that you really have to start listening to, because we're the ones that pay the taxes. We're the ones that do the voting, and we're the ones that live here, and we make Ottawa the community. We do everything. So I just beg that the city reconsider this. I think the best thing that we could do as far as everybody on Ziegler Street would be to leave Ziegler alone. There's trees that are about 15 feet from the property line. Leave those there and go back to where the property was zoned before in the restriction. And as far as if you want to put a large multi-story development on Renault Road, albeit go ahead, put 40 units there, but just don't impact Ziegler Street, because that's right now, that's going to crush us. And it's going to just completely change the dynamics of the street. And just to make a small amendment as to where you put all these units, I think it's best that you focus on getting them on Renault Road and getting them off Ziegler. And for God's sakes, leave the trees alone. You know, there's just a row about 15 feet from the road, and it makes all the difference in the world to everybody on Ziegler Street. And I guess I probably hit my time, so I'll stop myself.
You are right at time. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kelleher. Do we have any questions for the delegate? Seeing none, thank you for being here today. We did have one other delegate register, Christiane Wendt. We do not see her online, but perhaps she's in the room with us. I'm not seeing anyone come forward, so just one last check. No, not online. Okay. Okay. We're promoting someone who we think may. Okay, perfect. Christiane, if you're with us, you have 5 minutes.
Hi, am I gone now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, I echo Dan and Laura. I'm directly next door to them on the corner of Persifer. We know that it's going to be developed there, and I echo everything that they have said. I just clearly do not understand why you would want to come down on Ziegler Street when there's access to Renault, and knowing full well that it's going to be a dead end at Joshua. So it doesn't make sense for all those people to come down on Ziegler Street to get on Persifer to get back onto Renault. You're adding all this traffic on these streets. I had sent a notification a couple of times. There's currently 4 different school buses that come by here every single day. And there's a lot of kids that are walking to the stops. Now you're going to create a whole lot of traffic on this little beautiful street that we have for no real reason. I just don't understand why you would come in this way and not go straight to Renault. It's just, we've purchased 4 years ago. This is our retirement forever home. And again, we purchased because of what's in the front of us and the quietness of this little subdivision. It's so beautiful to sit here and look at those trees, and with the wind movement. They've survived every storm, and I hate to see a bulldozer come and take them down. It just doesn't seem right or fair to us here. We don't have any little kids, so the kid comments is just neighborhood kids. But can somebody please explain why you would even consider coming down Ziegler? It makes 0 sense. And I don't need to speak anymore because they've said everything that I wanted to say. But that's my big question. I really, really would like it answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Christiane. Do we have any questions for the delegate? Okay, I will bring your question forward, but thank you for being here today. Okay, we do have Paul Robinson from PH Robinson Consulting. If you'd like to come forward.
Good morning, committee. Paul Robinson here on behalf of the applicant. So maybe Mr. Valen can answer the question, but my understanding in terms of the reasoning for the access to be off Ziegler versus Renault is that it is a city transportation policy directive that when you have a major road and a minor road, that the access to the development is through the minor road when that is available, and it is in this situation. As indicated in the presentation that Mr. Balin provided, the application is to rezone the lands to a portion to be an R2 zoning and another portion to be an R4 zoning. The R4 zoning would contain 20 stacked units in 2 buildings of 10 units each. And that is subject to site plan approval. With 20 units, the transportation or traffic modeling generally generates between 6 and 8 cars in the AM or PM peak hour. That would go out to Ziegler and then Persifer and Renault. And that is the reasoning behind that. And we're here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Mr. Robinson? Oh, Councillor Curry.
Yeah, just a quick question on the comment. Hi, nice to see you again. The comment about, the developer may just rezone this, change this up and then sell it at a higher price. Is the developer interested in building right away?
The intent is to complete the zoning and site plan process during the next few weeks, and then the building permit drawings are underway, and it would probably be a spring construction. And in terms of the developer is based in Gatineau, but is currently building on Innes Road in Blackburn Hamlet, and is also has built in the Orleans area, just east of the Orleans town center already. Thank you.
Super, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions. Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Do you have any questions for staff? Yeah. Okay, seeing none, just one quick question. We did get a response from Mr. Robinson, but you could just explain why the traffic is going to Ziegler and not Renault.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. There are policies within the city's traffic engineering group that would promote the direction of driveways to minor roads. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to, but the applicant has chose to use that method, and it's something that we would agree with as well. So another thing that was brought up by the applicants is that there is a 30-centimeter reserve. An application will need to be made to lift that 30-centimeter reserve, and the owner is being made aware to contact Vailcraft for any required paybacks that might be needed for the frontages or to access that frontage. So they won't be off the hook for that. They will be having to pay their share. The city doesn't necessarily want one-sided streets. If there's a curb, we do promote to have housing on both sides unless it's a park.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll just make a quick comment. I do appreciate that a change in zoning is challenging for existing residents. There was a delegation that brought up the changes that will be forthcoming, hopefully, to realign Renault Road. Unfortunately, we don't know when that will happen, and we are, having to evaluate the application today. And I also will just note that, there was some significant changes from the original site plan based on some community feedback, including a reduction in units and a change in product to better fit with the existing residential community. So while I do fully appreciate there's still dissatisfaction, I do want to acknowledge that there were changes made, because that's not always the case. So is this item carried? Thank you very much. Okay, on to item 5.6, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, 30 Cleary Avenue. We will have a presentation from staff, and then we do have 19 delegations. So sit tight. 19. Whenever you're ready, I think we've solved our presentation issue. So.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Stream Shen, and I'm here before you today to present the staff recommendation for the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application at 30 Cleary Avenue. Next slide, please. The site is located in the city's McKellar Park and Woodruff North community, south of the Michizebe-Meekan Parkway, east of Woodruff Avenue, north of Richmond Road and Sherbourne Road, and west of Cleary Avenue. Next slide, please. The project itself is located in the Unitarian campus, which is highlighted in red. The campus hosts several existing buildings, including the First Unitarian Congregation of Ottawa, a two-story church building located at the northeast corner of the campus. It features a very unique architectural design. I'm sure many of you have seen it coming on the parkway. Just south of the church building is the Unitarian House, which is a four-story not-for-profit retirement residence for 113 units. Within the campus also includes the River Parkway Child Care Center, which is a one-story building located at the southwest corner of the campus. As you can see in the aerial image, the campus itself is bounded by many mature trees, both towards the western edge abutting the existing homes, as well as the northerly edge abutting the NCC land. The campus also features a central garden with mature and lush vegetation. The campus currently has a single access coming off of Cleary Avenue, which is located at the top right area of the drawing. But due to the current ongoing LRT construction, Cleary Avenue is currently closed. So the city, through its East-West construction team, has negotiated a temporary access, where it's generally shown in blue, across a private development land at 809 Richmond. So this is a temporary access and will be closed when Cleary Avenue is reinstated closer towards the end of the year. The campus itself is also in close proximity to Sherbourne Station. It's about 100 meters to the LRT station with a walking distance of approximately 200 meters. Some other context for the area: along Richmond Road south of the campus, there are an array of existing mid to high-rise buildings ranging in heights up to 24 stories. To the west of the site is an existing low-rise neighborhood. Next slide, please. The applicant is proposing 2 buildings on the northwestern corner of the campus on existing surface parking. There will be a 6-story building to the north and a 16-story residential building to the south, with a total of 214 units. The 6-story building is in partnership with Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services and will contain 66 affordable housing units. The 16-story building is often referred to as the Market Building and will include 148 rental units. In total, there will be 155 vehicle parking spaces being provided, with the majority being underground. The 111 residential parking will be attributed to the Market Building, with the 44 visitor parking split between the 2 proposed buildings. Next slide, please. Under the city's official plan, the site is located within the inner urban transect neighborhood designation, subject to an evolving overlay. Within the inner urban transect, mid to high-rise development is permitted, subject to proximity to transit, appropriate massing and building heights, and adequate water, sewer, and stormwater capacity. Next slide, please. The site is also located in the Sherbourne and New Orchard Secondary Plan, which is a policy document that provides the strategic vision to guide future development in close proximity to the 2 LRT stations. It is designated institutional mixed use, which permits high-rise buildings up to 16 stories in height, subject to appropriate transition from the neighboring low-rise through a 30-meter transition zone. The secondary plan spoke to minimizing shadow impact on the adjacent uses, and also placing the building to break up the cumulative massing impact along Richmond. As you can see on the slide deck, what's shown on purple is the location of the high-rise buildings along Sherbourne. So it's asking the proposed building to be farther away from those patch. The secondary plan also talks about a through-block pedestrian and cycling connection, connecting Sherbourne Station to the NCC pathway to the north. Next slide, please. The applicant has come in for a concurrent official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment application. The official plan amendment will seek to replace policy 17 in the secondary plan, which currently requires a 30-meter transition zone. The term transition zone is not a defined term within the secondary plan itself and is subject to some interpretation. It is most often measured from the property line. However, it can also be interpreted to include parts or whole of the rear yard for the adjacent home. So the official plan amendment will adjust the requirements through a clear and definable setback from the shared property line of 10.5 meter minimal setback for the mid-rise building and 14 meter minimal setback for the high-rise building. The accompanying zoning bylaw amendment application seeks to retain the existing minor institutional zone and create a site-specific zoning exception to permit a mid and high-rise building only on the exact location of where the buildings are proposed. The site-specific schedule will establish the minimal building setback, step back, and maximal height. A holding symbol will also be implemented so that the applicant can satisfy requirements related to tree retention, addressing fire flow demand, and a required water main crossing and connection to Richmond Road. Next slide, please. Staff is recommending approval of the two planning application based on the following rationales. The proposal conforms to the secondary plan vision. The secondary plans support the introduction of residential uses within the campus and permit a maximum building height of 16 story. The proposed development is within 200 meters walking distance to the future Sherbourne Old train station, and the city's official plan direct the highest density and height in proximity to rapid transit. The proposed development is also in close proximity to an array of amenities such as a Carlingwood Shopping Center, the Michizzipi Mikan Parkway, various commercial uses along Richmond Road, which helps to facilitate complete 15-minute community. The proposed development integrates well within the existing campus and enable protection of mature trees. By placing the two building on the underutilized surface parking area, it will allow for the protection of both the western and northerly buffer, as well as mature trees within the central garden. The proposed location of the building will also allow the retention of the existing driveway and accesses for the existing uses on site. As part of the secondary plan, the applicant is required to provide a new public pathway from Richmond Road to the Parkway. The applicant has entered into a letter of undertaking to provide and construct the pedestrian and cycling access on their site. They also will be using best effort to negotiate with the adjacent owner at 809 Richmond to construct a temporary access during the interim prior to its final redevelopment. As well as the applicant is required to undertake the federal land use approval process with the NCC to solidify the access to the NCC woodlots, connecting it to the Parkway multi-use pathway, creating another access not only for the existing and future residents, but also the greater community as a whole. One of the key considerations for high-rise development is compatibility and transition to the abutting low-rise. The proposed development achieve appropriate transitioning by increasing the minimal setback to the westerly lot line from 7.5 meter to between 10.5 and 14 meter. And this will help the protection of mature landscape trees in the western lot line. The high-rise building includes several step back after the building podium level and a tower floor plate of 750 square meter. The orientation of the building and the slim tower floor plate will help to reduce any shadow impact to the adjacent residents. The variation in height between the proposed buildings will help create interest in design and reduce the cumulative massing impact to the community. Based on the current policy direction within the secondary plan, the campus itself, due to its large size, can accommodate a number of high-rise buildings subject to the 30-meter transition requirement. So in comparison to the as-of-right visioning of the secondary plan, the proposed 6 and 16-story building, while located closer to the westerly lot line, achieve an appropriate transition to variation in massing, step back, minimal floor plate, and the protection of existing landscape buffer. The homes backing onto Laurier Avenue currently are very deep lots with an average lot depth of 50 meters and a rear yard setback ranging from 16 to 27 meter. So compared to that, to the more newer suburban standard of 6 meter, it creates very deep setback and help to allow for that appropriate transition from building to building. Lastly, the project includes the construction of 66 affordable housing unit, which contributes and align with the council's strategic priority for affordable housing provision. And as such, staff is recommending approval of the two planning application. And that concludes my presentation, and we're available to answer any questions.
Okay, before we go to questions, we will go to delegations, but I know that a lot of the delegations may touch on the entrance to the site. So I didn't know if you wanted to comment on that quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to roll back to the previous slide, I think it's the third slide in the presentation. We'll have a visual to help us.
That the correct slide?
No, a couple more to the front. A few more. Next one. Yeah, that's perfect.
One more. This one?
Yeah, that's perfect. So Madam Chair, as you can see on the screen, the Cleary Road is located at the top right corner, and that's a city local road connecting into the Unitarian campus. Once it reaches the Unitarian campus itself, it becomes a private driveway, and they have a looped configuration to allow for the access of the various buildings on site. The second access, a lot of the residents requested are generally where the blue arrow is shown, and that access is negotiated as part of the LRT construction because Cleary Avenue needed to be closed to allow for a detour to occur. On that specific site, which is address 809 Richmond, there was actually a prior zoning bylaw amendment on the site, which allows for a 24-story development proposal on a 4- and 6-story podium. The development proposal takes up the majority of the site, except it left a 3-meter strip of land to allow for that pedestrian access to occur. So overall, this is it's up to the applicant if they can negotiate with the private owner of another development parcel to obtain that land. And after discussion with the applicant, they have decided to proceed with the development based on a single entrance proposal. So that's what staff has assessed the development application based on. So really one of the primary focus of this site is its distance and access to transit. It's within 200-meter walking distance to the Sherbourne LRT station, and the applicant is obligated as part of the secondary plan to provide a pedestrian and cycling entrance. This really aligns with the city's vision to allow for alternative modal split. The transportation impact assessment completed by the applicant's consultant concluded that the proposed development site have a very high proposed transit modal share and will only add a small amount of peak hour traffic to the Cleary Avenue entrance. The Cleary Avenue entrance is also serviced by a full movement signalized intersection, and the transportation impact assessment did conclude that that intersection is operating at an acceptable level of service. Staff, as part of the application, also reached out to the city's emergency services team and did not hear any concern as part of having a single access into the site. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that additional context. So we will go to delegations and then return to questions to staff, and then we'll hear from the applicant as well, or in reverse order. So first up, we have Justine de Jager from the First Unitarian Congregation of Ottawa.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you. My name is Justine de Jager. My wife, myself, and my son are congregants at the First Unitarian Congregation of Ottawa, and I'm proud to serve as the chair of its Social Justice Action Network. This network includes groups focused on the alleviation of poverty, the promotion of human rights, mental health supports, and climate change advocacy. The First Unitarian Congregation of Ottawa has a long history of moving the needle on social justice in the Ottawa area, including caring for vulnerable populations in our community. In 1969, our congregation established the River Parkway Child Care Centre. In the 1980s, it built Unitarian House, a seniors residence on the property. We have long been aware that our large campus has even more potential. In 2018, our Poverty Action Group brought a motion to our congregation to build affordable housing on our campus. The congregation supported this resolution unanimously, and we embarked on a journey to find like-minded, social justice-oriented housing partners. We believe this initiative to be consistent with our charitable purposes, which include conducting the affairs of a liberal and democratic religious society and promoting the welfare of humankind. We ultimately worked with nonprofit real estate consultant and developer CADCO over 2 years to conduct a feasibility study and develop our master concept plan with the partners. This plan was also democratically adopted by our congregation. CADCO introduced us to the Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services in 2021, and we soon realized that the partnership was a perfect match for our congregation, which has been working on reconciliation initiatives in response to the release of the 2015 Truth and Reconciliation Report. Among these initiatives have been the provision of furniture and other household items to Indigenous women in transition housing through Minwashin Lodge, and the Ajashki program in 2020, which provides ongoing program support to Indigenous youth and young adults on our campus, emphasizing food security. Last year, the congregation voted to gift a portion of the campus to Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services as an act of reconciliation so that Indigenous families in need can live in a small affordable housing project on the land. The second taller building proposed would use higher rent units to subsidize as many deeply affordable units as feasible for target groups, including women and children, seniors, and persons with disabilities. Our campus currently provides many supportive programs, including a food cupboard for our community, gardens available to enjoy by all neighborhood residents, and a playground. The proposed housing initiatives would further serve our mission of using our campus to build supportive community. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you. Do we have any questions for the delegate? Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you very much for your presentation. We have a lot of delegates here today, and there is two major concerns with this development. One is the location of the buildings. Why were the buildings put so close to the property lines? Why were they not put somewhere where this would not be an issue?
I think that's probably a question best directed towards our development partners. I honestly can't get into the specifics of that. Was simply told it was feasible in the best location given the campus layout.
Okay, but ultimately the congregation makes the decision of what happens. The other question is, and this is coming from the Unitarian House, and we'll hear from them, is providing another exit. There's concern, particularly during the construction period of traffic, and that this is a very peaceful place on the campus, and that having one exit would be problematic. How does the congregation feel about adding another exit?
I mean, again, I'm not particularly aware of, what would be allowable under kind of, you folks would be more aware than myself. I think if a second exit were possible, that would be fantastic. If not, I hope that we could find the best option possible to continue forward with the project.
Yeah, we'll be asking the developer for sure.
Great.
But these are the major questions, and I'm sure you're aware of them.
Sure.
Okay, thank you for your delegation. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanaugh. Councillor Chester.
Hi, Justine. Nice to see you here.
Nice to see you.
Different contexts. We share community together in other ways. I just had a couple questions about your partnership with the Aboriginal Coalition. So will they own the land? Will they own the building? I'm just very interested in how this is going to work, because I understand that one building will be entirely run by them and the other one will be run by you.
That's right. So it'll be entirely run and owned by them. It was a seeding of the portion of the campus. Yeah.
That's great. The only thing I'll suggest to you is as you move forward with this development in your other tower, the one that you own, you might be eligible for the city's affordable housing community improvement plan if you want to make affordable units in that building too. So I'd encourage you to get in touch with the city about that. But just want to say thank you. This is what we want to see churches do with their land, is build affordable housing. So I know this is a really exciting moment to finally have this project come to planning committee. So thank you for being here.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Councillor Troster. I'm not seeing any other hands up, so thank you for the delegation.
Thanks for your time.
Move on to the next one, David Fraser, please.
Can everyone hear me properly? The acoustics in this room are really off. Madam Chair and fellow councillors, thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on the 30 Cleary project application. My name is David Fraser, and I am a resident on Laurier Avenue adjacent to the First Unitarian Church. I want to congratulate you on the quality of both the official and secondary plans for the North Woodruff community where I live. Not normally someone to get into the details of such plans, this application has compelled me to do so, And the detail and thought contained in these plans is truly noteworthy. I am left, though, with a question. Why deviate from these plans after all the work done by your staff, all the consultation that you have done before you actually presented these plans that are less than 2 or 3 years old? First Unitarian Church knew the details of the secondary plan, probably contributed to the consultation of these plans. And why did they not raise their questions and concerns about the plans that they are asking for an amendment to today? Why are we doing this at this stage of the planning cycle when you have other things that are a priority? Let me be clear. I am for building accommodations so desperately needed in our city and in our nation. I am not, though, at building at all costs. I believe that in this case, moving the buildings away from the residential neighborhood is doable, satisfying both the desires for building by the applicant and the desires of the neighbors and the residents. Simply put, move the buildings further east. The site has plenty of space, and the placement of these two buildings has created a requirement to adjust normal understandings of setbacks. Why cram the buildings up so close to the lot line on the west? Normally, setbacks are measured from the lot line. Why is it that on page 40 of the FOTAN design document that they have the right to include private property as part of the transition for this project? And secondly is, what is the definition of a very deep lot in accordance with Ottawa criteria? What is a normal sized lot? What is a small lot? But where are the definitions so that we as residents can understand that when we buy a lot? I respect their property. So why does the FOTAN and the First Unitarian Church have rights on my property? Where are my rights as a property owner? And is this in fact creating a precedent for the city for future development for similar situations? Should you approve the definition of a setback for this mixed-use application, where else will this affect applications across the city of Ottawa? More succinctly, are you not creating a precedent by doing so? And will this create issues for densification and property ownership that could degrade the quality of life in the city for all residents affected by the approval of this setback request? I am in favor of moving the buildings at least 20 meters, not 30, but 20 meters from the lot line to satisfy both the applicant's wishes and those of my own. Rotating the buildings again about 30 degrees towards the east away from the boundary would more than satisfy the requirements of everyone concerned. Finally, while I support the construction of the buildings like these, where is the daycare? I say again, where is the daycare? Where are the seniors' facilities to augment, to complement such increase of residents that are coming in? The applicant could have easily offered more seniors and daycare opportunities complementary to what is already existing on the campus that we have today. And in doing so, would also complement the construction of buildings along Richmond Road, where we are increasing the number of residents here that will also come with children, will come with parents that will have needs. Where are the facilities for those needs that are commensurate with the needs of accommodations?
Mr. Fraser, you are at time, so if you could.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for coming out today. I will be asking, since you can't ask directly, I will be asking a number of the questions that are going to come up today to both the developer and to staff. So I just wanted you to know that so that you're aware, particularly in terms of the setbacks.
Thank you.
Not seeing any other questions for you. Thank you very much. Next is Kathy O'Connor from the Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Anine, my name is Kathy Connor, and I am the Senior Director of Housing Development for Ontario Aboriginal Housing. I thank you very much, first of all, for allowing me a few minutes of your time today. I don't want to speak to you about the need for affordable housing in Ottawa. I am very sure that you're all aware of the importance and the need for affordable housing. Today, I just wanted to take a couple minutes to talk to you very quickly about who Ontario Aboriginal Housing is, because you might not be aware. We are the largest Indigenous housing provider in Ontario. Our membership consists of 3 of the largest off-reserve Indigenous organizations in Ontario that lead and direct us: the Métis Nation of Ontario, the Ontario Federation of Indigenous Friendship Centres, as well as, as well as ONWA, Ontario Native Women's Association. We have 8 offices across Ontario, and we have 150 staff and growing every day. 70 to 80% of our staff identify as Indigenous, and we are incorporated in 1994, so we have a proven track record. One of the reasons why I wanted to bring this up today is to let you know that we are committed to being able to build our first development in Ontario, in Ottawa, the first of many, hopefully, to come. Recently, we were just identified as a frequent builder for CMHC, so we will have the resources and the ability to be able to bring our development to fruition. And I think the last thing that I'd like to say today simply is we have found a development and partners that check the box for urban Indigenous people. We have a sustainable development. We are close to the LRT station, and we have been very accepted by First Unitarian Thea Group. And many times we do not see that as an Indigenous organization. So I would like to compliment everybody as well as the city for even allowing us the time to be heard and seen today. And I would be open to any questions that anybody has for Ontario Aboriginal Housing. Miigwech.
Thank you very much. We do have a question for you from Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Kathy, for coming out today. I just wanted to state that there are concerns in terms of where locations of buildings and an exit, but there is no concerns about the that I have seen on the housing, the Aboriginal housing. I think it is a good partnership. We look forward to it. I think people will have questions just on terms of how you're setting up. Are you planning to have families? Are you planning to have singles? It is your decision, but I think that that's just a question that people have of, in terms of the usage of the building.
Very fair. And we'd be glad to answer anything, Councillor Kavanagh.
Pardon? Yeah, do you have it? Is there plans yet, or is that still under formulation?
We're still under formulation. We know that we're looking at 1 and 2 bedroom units at affordable rates. Ontario Aboriginal Housing services all of Ontario. So we have a central application registry where anyone can put their name into our central application registry to be considered for housing that comes to Ottawa. We will also work directly with our Indigenous partners, because they might have people on their wait list as well. Or perhaps it could be even the local district service board that might have Indigenous people on their wait list. Because what Ontario Aboriginal does very well is work directly with the local service providers and other not-for-profits. We are all serving the same goal of trying to house people. So if somebody's already on somebody's wait list, we find many, many times that they're on all of our wait lists. So we work together to try and, not by name, but to be able to remove them from other people's wait lists as they become housed, because it becomes a win-win for everybody then.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanaugh. I'm not seeing any other questions for you, but thank you very much for your delegation this morning. Move on to the next. We have, it says Chuck Shields or Brent Nickel from Canadian Unitarian Council. Chuck, I see you there.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Very good. Sorry for the view, but let me start. Thank you very much. I've been a member of the First Unitarian Congregation for 40 years, and I'm currently president of the board. Nearly 60 years ago, the congregation moved from their beloved home on Elgin Street that had served them for over half a century to a new building that at the time seemed far to the west on the other side of Westboro. They moved to a campus that provided space for their new building and their dreams. Among those dreams, the leaders of the congregation wanted to contribute to meeting Ottawa's needs for services for children and for the elderly. The first step was to provide space for the River Parkway Children's Center and educational daycare that operated for many years in the basement rooms of the congregation. Not many years later, plans began to take shape that led to the creation in 1984 of Unitarian House, a modern facility that provides services to the elderly with different levels of need. The First Unitarian Congregation provided the land on its campus and other support for construction. A few years later, the RPCC secured funding to build a dedicated early childhood education facility, and again, the First Unitarian Congregation provided land on its campus. That left a large parking area in the center of the campus. Members of the congregation began asking what other needs there were in the city that might be addressed through the use of this land, and decided that providing housing would be a worthy goal. In keeping with its many-year commitment to social justice, the congregation investigated and discussed what might be done. Gradually, the vision emerged to add to the city's supply of affordable and deeply affordable housing. In 2018, the members of the congregation voted to move forward to add affordable housing to its campus. As part of its decision, the congregation committed to 4 goals: to respond to the housing crisis in the city of Ottawa, converting asphalt parking to affordable rental homes; to provide a tangible and meaningful step towards reconciliation; to demonstrate a high level of environmental performance in construction of the buildings and by taking advantage of the close proximity to LRT; and to create a sustaining revenue stream to help support the congregation's mission in the community far into the future. The congregation then invested in studies, conducted surveys, held many sessions both with members and the community to discuss what might be done. Finally, in March 2023, the members of the congregation voted 95% in favor of a plan that would see the construction of 2 buildings and the creation of Odeanawe, or Little Village. One building will be 6 stories in collaboration with Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services on land that the congregation will provide them free. The other building will be 16 stories in collaboration with VIA partners. Together, the buildings will provide approximately 220 rental homes, with over 80% being affordable or deeply affordable. In its planning, the congregation decided to express its values through the construction of these buildings by ensuring that 80% or more of the 220 units in the project will be affordable or deeply affordable, by mandating that highly sustainable approaches be used in construction in the 2 buildings' operation, by acting in keeping with the congregation's commitment to reconciliation by giving Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services the land they will use to construct their 6-story building, by supporting the sustainability by generating housing that reinforces the city's goal of 15-minute neighborhoods by being within 200 meters of an LRT station and being close to excellent cycling infrastructure, and by protecting the natural environment by ensuring construction will have minimal impact on the many mature trees and award-winning gardens that are on the congregation's campus. The congregation is also committed to protecting the safety of those on our campus, both during and after construction. This includes residents of Unitarian House, the children and their families of River Parkway Children's Center, and members of our congregation. We and our development partners will work with and solicit input from all of these groups as the site and construction plans are developed. I and other members of the congregation are looking forward to the city's approval of this project, which will allow us to create Odeanawe, and expand the vibrant community that is our campus. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shields, and thank you for giving us the history. I think it's very helpful. And I don't think anyone's has an argument with this is going to happen, that there's going to be buildings. I've met with the community members. I've met with Unitarian House. The two questions that are outstanding is the location of the buildings and why it's so close to the property line. That is been the issue, why those locations were chosen. It's obviously a point of contention. And with Unitarian House, why was not a second exit negotiated as well?
Let me say a few words to your first question. When the idea of building building on our campus first came up, we were proposing that the building be along what is called the CPR strip, which is up just north of Richmond Road. But the city said, nope, we can't build there. I think that's probably because there's a high pressure water main that passes through that area. That forced us to look at other areas on the campus. I've mentioned, and others have made allusion to, the fact that we do have award-winning gardens on our campus. They are just to the east of the parking lots that are at this point used, but not as intensively. As city staff have pointed out, we are locating the buildings, both of them, beyond what the usual separation is, and we think is still providing quite a bit of separation from the properties to the west. If we move the properties or the buildings further to the east, we are going to be starting to destroy the gardens that are there, and those are a major focus for people's life on the campus, for members of the congregation, for residents of Unitarian House, and children and their families from RPPC. Regarding the second entrance, it has been great having that entrance for the last while. Keeping that going is going to be very difficult to sustain. We understand from what city staff have said that they have checked and confirmed that the single entrance from Cleary would be satisfactory. We would be, as was mentioned, I think also by city staff, if it's possible to have a construction entrance during the time before the construction starts at the old Christie site, which I think is called 809 Richmond. That is something that would be great to do and would help relieve pressures during that construction period.
So is the congregation looking to talk to the property owners at 803 Richmond during the construction period?
I believe that our development partners have had some discussions with them, and there'd be some conversations about what might be possible.
Okay, so that is a conversation that's still ongoing.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know. In terms of the gardens, is there no way that gardens could not be in another location?
No, gardens are created where they are, and it's very hard to pick them up and move. No. Those have been established. I mean, there are mature trees in the gardens as well that it would be impossible to move them, and they're centered around a natural stream that flows through there. They couldn't be moved. I mean, some individual trees, bushes can, but no, the gardens themselves can't be. And frankly, the current construction plans show the eastward side of construction going up as far as possible to the gardens while protecting the root structure of those gardens. And in fact, the construction plans call for building barriers to ensure that the construction materials don't flow over into the garden.
Okay, I guess there's definitely a difference of opinion on that, but appreciate your
I'm not surprised,
explanation.
but
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Shields.
okay.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanaugh. I'm not seeing any other questions. So thank you, Mr. Shields.
Welcome, thank you.
On to our next delegation, Eric Meter, also from the Canadian Unitarian Council.
Good morning. My name is the Reverend Eric Meter, and I came to Ottawa 3 years ago to serve the congregation of First Unitarian after over 20 years of professional ministry in the U.S. Never before have I had the honor to serve a community of dedicated citizens who are willing to go big in such visionary ways as First Unitarian is. As Chuck just said, the congregation moved to its current location nearly 60 years ago. For years, if not decades, our previous location on Elgin was simply too small for us. We had to get creative to find room for Sunday school classes nearby when there wasn't room in the church itself. Off Richmond, where we are now, the congregation had room to breathe, but we didn't simply rest. We went to work forming both a preschool and what remains arguably the best nonprofit senior care facility in the city, the Unitarian House of Ottawa. For decades now, we have also helped settle refugees and more recently have started an Indigenous-led learning center, the Ajaski Garden. This step into active reconciliation helped lead us to thinking even larger in scope. The plans before you are an outgrowth of that and have an even larger promise to help create more affordable and deeply affordable housing, which our city dearly needs. We take our role in our neighborhood and city seriously. Yes, these plans mean changes to our little corner of the city, and change isn't always easy. Just ask those dealing with the LRT construction. Still, First Unitarian strives to inspire courage to nurture a more just and compassionate world. That's what these plans are all about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Hi, I just wanted to simply say thank you very much for your delegation, and we'll be hearing from the delegates who have concerns. I don't know if you have any comments about the two major concerns that are being presented regarding the setback and the exit. As
Chuck Shields, our congregational president, said, we had originally proposed a different location for these buildings. We put them where we are in response to City Planning Commission recommendation. As to the second entrance, I'm sure you will be hearing from residents of Unitarian House. They will tell you, and this is true, access to their building has been blocked 3 times in the last 18 months. I'm not speaking for the congregation when I say this, I'm speaking for myself. I think a second entrance would be a good idea. And I'm sure there are people in my congregation and delegation who are not happy to hear me say that. My mother was a emergency medical personnel, and we have close family friends who are fire members. I think a second entrance is a good idea, even though it's right next to the Children's River Parkway Learning Center. I'm not a city planner. That is not my profession. I hear from the city that it's too close. I have to take them at their word and trust their expert advice.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. No other questions. Thanks so much. Next, we have Margaret Linton, who I believe is joining us online. Good morning, Margaret.
Hi, and you can all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. Okay, I hope I can answer some of your questions. So my name's Margaret Linton. I'm speaking to you as a longtime member of the Congregation of Ottawa, First Unitarian Congregation of Ottawa, as a neighbor who lives 15 minutes walk away, and as a future resident of Unitarian House, which is, as you know, the seniors' home on the campus. We are on the waiting list right now. In the meantime, we may become renters in the proposed apartment building on campus. And I'm really looking forward to getting rid of our car and being close to the transit. I highly support this initiative. I have held many roles within the congregation, including most recently treasurer, but my current role in the congregation is as the team lead of the gardeners who maintain the meditation gardens on the campus, and we support this initiative. These gardens are in the center of the campus, on either side of the stream running through the campus. The gardens consist of winding paths, arbors, bridges, seating, set amidst a wide variety of mature trees, shrubs, and plants. The garden is an oasis for us and our neighbors. This includes Unitarian House, the River Parkway Children's Center, both of which are located on the campus, but it also includes the local community, especially the nearby multi-unit buildings whose tenants enjoy walking on the campus, and it allows them access to the nearby NCC land. Families roam these gardens and appreciate the story walk created in the garden by our religious exploration director. We look forward to the tenants of these new buildings enjoying the gardens too, and accessing the NCC land, and perhaps participating in the garden. The plan for this site, the building of the two residential buildings, has retained the gardens as central to the campus, which is most important to the congregation, the campus, and the neighborhood. This is the reason for the change in setbacks required for the building locations. It turned out the recommended city setting was right on top of all the mature trees, right in the center of campus, which is not particularly environmental. And we are also pleased that the plan has recommended protective measures to protect the gardens during construction. So in summary, this project provides an opportunity to build affordable housing on our campus, an opportunity to work with our Indigenous neighbors. It will protect the environment and allow all to appreciate it, which is very much in keeping with our congregation's mission and principles. So I hope you now understand why we cannot build in the middle of the campus. I wish I had brought pictures. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a little bit of feedback in the room. I'm not seeing any questions for you, but thank you very much for being here today. Next, we have Jackie Holzman, also with Unitarian House. Welcome back to City Hall.
To save time, we'll all get up together. So it's been a long time since I've been here, never on this side of the table. Thank you and good morning. Thank you for listening as Unitarian House of Ottawa presents our concerns to you. I'm Jackie Holzman, a resident and the president of the board of Unitarian House. I'll say UH. I was also the alderman at the opening in October 1984. As you've heard, UH was conceived by the First Unitarian Congregation over 50 years ago. We do not own our building, but have a paid up lease until 2048. So we do not own our land either. And as you've heard, we're about 130 residents in 45 retirement suites and 68 independent living apartments. For 40 years, the residents of UH Seniors Community have enjoyed a safe, open oasis. Yes, there is a lot of gravel and asphalt, but that's where the hundreds of cars park for visits, concerts, weddings, funerals, and just for doing business in the church and in the daycare and in UH. In fact, the lack of parking that's going to be created on grade, the church has already asked us to lease back 15 of our spaces to be used by the church. But it's also a safe place for vulnerable seniors to exercise and for kids to run around before and after daycare, and they do. We fully understand the need for housing, and we are not objecting to sharing our oasis with 214 units and possibly up to 400 families, kids, and teenagers. But here's the situation. Because of the delay in the LRT work, it was necessary to close Cleary Avenue, thus blocking Cleary Driveway, the only access to the church, daycare, and Unitarian House. Fortunately, as staff said, there was an undeveloped parking lot at 809 Richmond Road, Christie's Restaurant, available. The city leased the land for a 2-year period ending in October 24, and they built a road joining Richmond Road and the First Year campus. They paved it, installed a sidewalk and traffic control signals. But the end of October, it will be barricaded and dug up, a perfectly good road. You will hear why we strongly believe this temporary Christie's access must be maintained, even when Cleary reopens. It will provide 2 means of access to the new housing, which is in a dead-end culvert. And it's interesting, the Navan site and Ziegler, they don't want the second access, and we need the second access. Without the Christie's driveway, the only vehicular access to Richmond Road for the 2 new buildings and all others is on a private driveway over leased land. 30 Cleary has no frontage on Cleary Avenue. It's only on the driveway. The Cleary driveway was not built to handle the increase of weight and volume during and after construction. You can imagine if it was blocked. As you heard from Reverend Eric, it's happened before and it will happen again. It's only a matter of time. Everyone who lives, works, visits for any reason must be protected and have access to emergency services. Without a second access, there can be no safe development. Staff is requiring easements for the 2 crossings of 809 Richmond Road over Christie's private property. They're requiring a pedestrian cycle pathway direct north to the NCC lands and a water main crossing. Staff is also recommending a holding bylaw that is, quote, related to tree retention, addressing fire flow demand, and the required water main crossing and connection through adjacent property to Richmond Roads, end of quote. The adjacent property is Christie's. Tree retention is what makes this campus special, but I may suggest that safety is an even higher priority. Therefore, on behalf of the residents, staff, volunteers who live, learn, play, and pray on First Unitarian Campus, UHO is requesting the following: that the holding bylaw be expanded to require an easement for a vehicular access, a vehicular driveway, in addition to the pathway and the water main across the same adjacent property, 809 Richmond Road, for the health and safety for all who will live, work, play, and pray in the little village. Thank you for your consideration. I'll turn the mic over to the others and they will introduce themselves. Unless there's questions.
Did you want to?
We can
I
do
have
all
Jennifer
our
along next
If
time.
you'd like, we can do all our delegations and you can ask the questions all at once.
Sure. Yeah.
No repeating them.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Novatech was retained in July 2024 by the Unitarian House of Ottawa. We are retained to review the Transportation Impact Assessment Report filed in support of the official plan amendment and zoning applications. Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll just start over. Novatech was retained in July 2024 by the Unitarian House of Ottawa. We are retained to review the Transportation Impact Assessment Report filed in support of the official plan amendment and zoning applications. We documented our review in a letter of submission to the city on July 24th. As we've heard, the existing site consists of a church, a seniors residence, and a daycare. The seniors building has 130 residents and 45 staff. We understand the church has a congregation of about 40 to 80 people, and the daycare has about 55 children and 25 staff. The site is accessed by a single driveway to Cleary Avenue, and Cleary Avenue is a short local road with a right-of-way of just 14 meters. It accesses Richmond Road at a signalized intersection and dead ends at the site with no turnaround for municipal or emergency services. The Continental condo building also takes access from Cleary Avenue with about 100 units. The signalized Richmond Road, Cleary Avenue intersection was closed for the Stage 2 LRT construction. A temporary signalized access was provided through the former Christie's restaurant site at 809 Richmond Road. The temporary access will be removed in October when Richmond Road and Cleary Avenue intersection reopens. As we've heard, the city approved a zoning application for a 24-story mixed-use tower at 809 Richmond Road. A future path is planned along the east side of that site with access to the future Sherbourne LRT station. We understand a pathway connection from Richmond Road through the Cleary Avenue site will be required as part of a future site plan. A holding provision is required for a water main connection through 809 Richmond Road. We suggest that the holding provision should include the pathway connection from Richmond Road. The TIA for the proposed development includes a review of the proposed parking for the new buildings. However, the existing on-site parking wasn't reviewed. The new buildings will result in a loss of over 100 existing spaces, and there's no discussion of how this will be addressed. The TIA says the existing two-way traffic on Cleary Avenue is about 150 vehicles per hour in the weekday PM peak. This is equivalent to approximately 1,500 vehicles per day. It's expected that the on-site traffic will approach the Transportation Association of Canada threshold of 1,000 vehicles per day or 100 vehicles per hour for a local residential street. We understand there are no planned improvements to the existing private drive aisle along the south side of the seniors' residence. The drive aisle has a paved width of 6.5 meters with a 1.5 meter sidewalk. Any widening would impact the slope on the south side and the gardens. Given the constraints and the vulnerable road users, a second access should be considered. A blockage on Cleary Avenue or the private drive aisle would leave the site with no alternative access, and we understand this has already happened on several occasions. Redundancy is recommended in the event of a collision, a fallen tree, a broken pipe, fire, or the eventual replacement of infrastructure. A second access could include a shared driveway through 809 Richmond Road, and we understand that UHO has discussed vehicular access with the owner of 809 Richmond Road, and they're open to it. If a holding symbol can be added to the zoning for the required water main connection through 809 Richmond Road, and potentially a future pathway, it could be expanded to include a shared private driveway. A second access would ensure safe operation to everyone on the campus in the event of an emergency. It would provide direct access to the new mid-rise and high-rise buildings, the daycare, and the church. It would direct some traffic away from the Continental condo and seniors' residence. In conclusion, we recommend a second access from a traffic perspective for safety and operational reasons. The requirement to negotiate a shared driveway with 809 Richmond Road could be included in the holding provision, along with the water main and pathway connections. Thank you.
Right on time. Next, we have Dr. Ian Arnold, and we do have a presentation.
My coach beside me here is asking me to move this up, but I can't, so I'll just lean forward. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address this gathering today. I think we have some slides, yes. I'm going to talk about health and safety impacts, and there's been a lot of chat about safety today, but very little about health, and we have to remember that health impacts are just as important, and particularly so for vulnerable populations as the safety impacts. Next slide, please. I won't go into this. You can read it. It's all up there. I am a physician. I'm an occupational medical specialist. I've got lots of experience in the field. I've been responsible for up to 45,000 employees in one multinational organization I headed up health and safety in. And of special interest is that my wife and I are second generation residents of Unitarian House and very pleased to be there. Next slide, please. So what are the health and safety issues of concern? If you look at it from a purely health and safety perspective, traffic would be considered a hazard. It has obvious health and safety impacts, including things like noise and vibration, dust, particles, toxic fumes and gases, and even light pollution. There are vehicle collision risks between all sorts of different vehicles and pedestrians. There's the risk mentioned already of traffic obstruction. There are issues related to the vulnerabilities of the populations of both UHO and the young children at the River Parkway Children's Center. There are psychological health and safety impacts, especially on the elderly, fear and anxiety from increased populations, and from many of the other impacts that I've mentioned. Next, please. So let's understand why the UHO resident population is vulnerable. Most residents, or many of the residents, have hearing and vision losses. They're unable to hear and or see vehicles nearby or discriminate how far away these vehicles may be. They may have difficulty communicating between each other. They may fear social isolation from noise. They may fear vibration effects. In any elderly population, there's an increased incidence of major diseases that can be exacerbated by stress, contaminants, and noise. For example, coronary artery disease. Cognitive issues, even mild ones, can lead to difficulty in decision-making. Lack of appropriate judgment skills lead to increased risk issues. Mobility concerns. As you saw, many of us used walkers and canes to assist in getting around and therefore take more time to move from one place to another. Several residents also have service dogs that accompany them. Psychological resilience can decrease with age and may be impacted by the substantial increase in the presence of individuals and vehicles crossing UHO land. Seniors may also be more fearful of personal attack or theft and damage to personal and UHO property. Next slide, please. How will our residents, which are a vulnerable population, be impacted by the construction phase? Traffic volume and potential obstructions during construction could impair access of emergency vehicles, service vehicles, the residents themselves, and staff trying to access UHO, RPCC, and the First Unitarian Church, and their respective parking areas. Extended hours of construction activity and the presence of large vehicles will lead to excessive noise, vibration, particulates, toxic gases, and fumes, leading to an increase in or exacerbation of disease processes, especially in our susceptible population. Traffic volume will significantly increase the risks for UHO residents, as I've described previously. Post-construction, all new traffic and existing traffic, and I mean all, will have to pass by UHO under the present plan, increasing the likelihood of potentially serious impacts on UHO residents in particular. There's also the potential for abuse of UHO parking spaces due to overall parking limitations with the risk of intimidation and abuse of UHO residents.
I will just let you know you are at 5 minutes. I don't know how many more speakers you have in your group.
Well, I'll just conclude. I'm on the last slide. So what are the mitigation measures that we propose? In the health and safety management principles, the first and best line of defense is to eliminate a hazard. Obviously, this is not possible.
The second is to modify the hazard, in this case, traffic, and change the risk impact profile. Less traffic means less risk. Protective equipment measures, which several people have suggested, are always the last and least effective line of defense. The best option, from my perspective as a health and safety professional, is to retain 2 entrances to the campus, which will reduce the traffic impact on UHO by a minimum of 30% and likely closer to 50%. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Alex Campbell.
Madam Chair, members of the Planning Committee, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak today. My name is Alexander Campbell, and I live with my wife at Unitarian House. I'm in my 84th year, and I'm one of the median age residents, slightly below the average age in this vibrant, award-winning, not-for-profit seniors retirement home. When we came to Unitarian House more than 12 years ago, Cleary Avenue was a driveway to the church and a peaceful enclave, a green oasis between busy Richmond Road and the Ottawa River Parkway. Significantly, as with so many other residents, health concerns and the quality of life at our home motivated our move to Unitarian House. I have chronic heart disease and chronic heart failure, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and Parkinson's disease. My wife has cardiac issues necessitating a pacemaker. There are many seniors at Unitarian House who, if they were able, would speak of their own personal health concerns, many with ailments similar to mine, others with dementia. Some are cancer survivors. Some are living with cancer. Most are hard of hearing and have vision problems. Some are legally blind. As Dr. Arnold has just said, everything associated with the construction site will make all our health conditions worse. We are indeed a very, very vulnerable population. With the intended 2 buildings and the additional 400 plus people living on the campus, Unitarian House and the River Parkway Day Stay Center will soon be part of what the city is calling a 15-minute neighborhood and what the applicant is calling a little village. For such neighbors to succeed and to flourish, the quality of life of those who live in the neighborhood has to be considered and maintained. This refers to people's emotional, social, spiritual, and physical well-being. Inclusiveness and respect for all ages is paramount. Adequate sleep and regular exercise, healthy relationships, safety and safe environment, these are all essential. To live joyfully, we must feel valued as seniors, and the environment needs to show that. Our quality of life and the safety of all residents and visitors on the campus will be seriously affected if there is only one entrance to the Unitarian campus. During construction, an alternative entrance will be absolutely necessary to contain the noisy traffic of concrete mixers, cranes, front-end loaders, bulldozers, and other heavy-duty vehicles, which would otherwise pass along Cleary Avenue within 15 feet of the southern-facing apartments. I'll repeat that. All this heavy-duty stuff will be passing within 15 feet of our apartments on the southern side of the building. Once the buildings are complete, a second entrance will be absolutely necessary to accommodate the extra traffic relating to an additional 400 plus people living on the campus, theirs and their visitors' vehicles, service vehicles, emergency vehicles such as ambulances and fire trucks, all over and above the regular traffic to and from the church for weekly services, weddings, celebrations of life, other church activities, and concerts. Traffic flow on campus must protect the safety of all. A second entrance, apart from Cleary Avenue, is absolutely essential if the little village is to become a reality. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think last in your group is Janet Beauvais.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Planning Committee for this opportunity to speak today. My name is Janet Bove and I'm a resident of Unitarian House. I live in the retirement residence where we are provided with daily nursing assistance and assistance with our activities of daily living. I am also the resident liaison to the Resident Association Executive. I'm a former chronic disease epidemiologist from the Public Health Agency of Canada. I'm also the former Director General of Food at Health Canada and a former professor of practice in the School of Management at McGill, as well as the McGill Center for the Convergence of Health and Economics, which I believe is pertinent to this proposal. It would be fitting for me to talk about the importance of physical activity and walking in particular for physical health, mental health, and the quality of living. But today I'd like to focus on the aspect of safe walkability of our future proposed campus. I am visually impaired. I only see a few feet in front of myself. I also am mobility impaired and I suffer from several chronic conditions. Oh, sorry. Yeah. One reason I chose to live at Unitarian House was because I would be able to walk daily all year round on a safe campus. I walk a lot, 2 hours a day with my service dog and often with my toddler grandson who will begin daycare on campus in 2 weeks. I do many laps around the campus and this necessitates using the sidewalk on the Cleary driveway. This is our only access from the front of the campus to the back, as on the north side of the campus, we have an NCC fence. So all my laps involve walking down this sidewalk of a narrow driveway, which is only 6.5 meters in width. As I say, the road is narrow, 6.5 meters. When a construction vehicle goes by, I could almost feel it on my arm, and particularly when two vehicles are side by side. Imagine what this would be like during the construction phase. Cars going one way, construction vehicles, perhaps two, who have to be very close to the sidewalk. It's difficult to cross Cleary at our entrance. That is where the stop sign is, to cross Cleary to access a parking lot and to walk to the lights at Cleary and Richmond. With increased traffic, I can't imagine what this would be, 150 cars at peak time. We had a glimpse of what this might be like when the Continental had to use the Cleary driveway when the LRT. We also had a glimpse of this when the church rented out their back parking lot to LRT staff. And we had very heavy traffic during the mornings and afternoons. But this is an important issue, increased traffic, because often people are in a rush and they do not meet the 25-kilometer-per-hour posted speed. It's much higher than that. And they do rolling stops at our one stop sign, and they often don't even stop. So that's a reality of life when you have increased traffic. My colleagues have presented a wide range of information and viewpoints for your consideration. We all conclude that the only viable solution is to have a second entrance to the campus at the current Christie intersection. In conclusion, we request that the Planning Committee consider all options and mechanisms to make our campus safe for all those who live, work, pray, and play. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you for your delegations. So we will take questions to the entire group, starting off with Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jackie, for organizing everyone today. Welcome back to City Hall. Nice to have you. And very impressive that you're, with the presentations. My question is, we were talking earlier about the possibility of the exit that you're asking for just being during construction, because that would mean a lease, and that would mean the applicant would need to negotiate that with the property owner of 809 Richmond. Would that be satisfactory if that happened?
Well, thank you for something that we have considered, and we know that it's absolutely, absolutely necessary. Absolutely. When you see the big vehicles that go to any other construction site, right below the window, Alex's window, a few feet away, it's absolutely necessary. But we're looking at the long term. And in the long term, that's where it becomes critical.
Okay, because what's already been proposed is a pedestrian access, so that from the campus to Richmond Road to get to the station quicker, which means more walkability, and hopefully you can take your grandchild or your dog or whatever for a walk, and you'll have safe passage. There's always a concern, and I'm just throwing this out, that when you have more roads, you have more vehicles, and that having another road access can actually add to traffic. But I'll ask the experts on that. I haven't checked with them, so I will ask that. But my other thought is, in terms of the campus itself, there's a concept called a WUNERF, and maybe you're familiar with that. A WUNERF is where you're slowing down cars completely because it's a pedestrian dominated area, but cars can pass through. And perhaps that's something that can be entertained by the applicant. Just want to get your thoughts on that.
No matter what you call it, if it blocks, and it could block, it's happened 3 times already recently, as Reverend Eric has mentioned, and it's probably more. If it blocks, it doesn't matter what the configuration is, you cannot get out. And at least now we have a second access. We have fire trucks, police trucks, and Amazon deliveries. It's not the people that come by LRT.
The city staff have said that it's satisfactory to have one exit, and we have had other applications where with larger developments that with one exit. And so, but we can ask what safety measures can be put in. What would you want to see?
We know that the light can handle the in and out traffic. It's what happens when they get onto the site. It's not getting in and out. We know it can handle it, but they can't handle it on our little laneway. It's a laneway that's owned by the church. It's leased to Unitarian House, and it was never built 40 years ago to handle what's being anticipated. And we're fortunate that there is an empty space right now at 809 Richmond Road.
I'll let my colleague ask questions, but just in terms of like the fact that there's reduced parking, I appreciate, I hope that that's appreciated, that there actually isn't going to be parking for everyone. Like it's been drastically reduced so that there is less cars coming on. I don't know if that's something that has been satisfactory.
The church already has asked us to lease them back, 15 of our spots that we're already using.
Okay. I'll let my colleague ask more questions, but we will be asking questions, or I will be certainly, to both staff and the developer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for your delegations. I'm glad to see you have a rep from Novatech here, and I just wanted to clarify through her if you had some traffic stats that you could just help us on the committee better understand. So do you know the current traffic volume that uses the lane off Cleary? What are the numbers that you have?
Right. So what is included in the applicant's traffic study shows what the traffic is at the signalized intersection at Richmond. So we know from that count, the two-way traffic coming in off of Cleary is 150 vehicles per hour in the PM peak. So the only thing between Richmond and the site itself, or the private portion of the laneway, is the Continental condo building. And so that building has about, I think it's 97 underground parking spaces. So if we're approximating the amount of traffic that's added and dropped at their driveway, if we estimate that it's maybe 80% of that number, or approximately 80 trips, then we still have maybe 60 vehicles an hour that are coming on site that currently. The traffic study says that the development, the mid and high-rise buildings will primarily be transit trips, but it will also come along with 20 vehicle trips an hour. So adding the 20 onto what we estimate as 60 on site already gets us in the order of 80 vehicles an hour, which is approaching that TAC threshold of 100, which is used for, a public local road.
So just so I'm clear, the net increase after the development on the campus is an additional 20 vehicles per hour?
That's what the traffic study stated, yeah.
Okay. And so your argument for a second access point is what? Just clearly spell it out for the committee.
Right. It's not necessarily just capacity. We know that the study found that the intersection at Richmond would operate acceptably, but it's more from the perspective of emergency services. We did hear Stream say that no concerns were heard. Did the emergency staff confirm that they had no concerns or nothing was voiced? But that's our chief concern, I guess, is that in the event of any closure, for whatever reason, Cleary needs to be rehabilitated in 50 years, or a tree falls, or there's an accident, what have you. How many people are stuck on that campus, including the Continental condo building, the 2 new buildings, the church, the daycare, and the seniors housing?
Novatech works on a number of development files like this one.
We do.
What other example can you cite where you've argued you need an additional access point?
We're currently working on a hearing right now in Perth for that very reason.
Okay, but nothing local in recent memory that you can recall?
I don't recall another one that's exactly like this situation off the top of my head, no.
Okay, fair enough. And I don't know whether you or Ms. Holtzman would know, but what's the current congregational enrollment at Unitarian?
I'm sorry, Unitarian House?
No, the church.
I'm a member, but I don't know. All I know it's less. It gets less all the time, and this is a financial concern of the church. I understand that they must have more money, and they're going to get the money from the development. But just to talk about the traffic on the site. Presently, there is more or less a ring road. You go in off of Cleary onto the driveway, and you can go all the way around the garbage trucks, the fire trucks, the ambulances. You can go all around and come back out onto Cleary Avenue. That won't happen because that ring road is not so. Vehicles have to go in and back up. They do that right now at the Continental. I see them from my window because they can't go out. So, and the other thing is traffic calming. Bumps on the road will make it impossible for people to live on that side of the south side of the building because every vehicle then hits a bump. So traffic calming, these sleeping policemen will not work. We are sleeping about 6 or 8 feet from the actual driving surface, so it won't work.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your delegation and the information you've shared. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. I don't see any other hands, but thank you very much again, and thanks for organizing yourselves to help us out. Next is Heather James.
Good morning to the Planning Committee members. I'm Heather James, a resident and condo board member from 35 Cleary, which is at the corner of Cleary Avenue and Richmond Road. I'd like to offer a few comments about the proposed development at 30 Cleary Avenue. Our condo board has previously provided a written submission on this proposal, which further sets out our concerns. The main impact of this development for 35 Cleary will be traffic, both during construction and thereafter. Therefore, the traffic study is particularly important. Due to LRT construction, traffic on Cleary Avenue has been completely disrupted for the last 4 years. Consequently, the data used for this study is quite old, including an assessment from June 2015. A comprehensive risk assessment has not been done. It does not reflect the current context in which we live. For lack of current relevant data, the study provides a poor basis for understanding how traffic will evolve in our neighborhood when this project is completed, along with 2 other residential high-rises and a low-rise in the immediate vicinity of Sherbourne Station. This is an area that will see very significant expansion of residential construction in the next decade. It will be a very different situation than we face today. The collision assessment in the traffic study is based on data from 2018 to 2022. In the summer of 2024, there was a single truck breakdown on Cleary Avenue, which completely blocked all traffic in and out of Unitarian House and 35 Cleary Avenue for several hours. A fire truck was brought in. The event greatly heightened the concern of residents at both locations to the potential vulnerability of residents with regard to access along a dead-end street. The traffic study does not consider this at all. This is a critical concern, particularly during the construction of the 2 proposed towers. There will be constant truck traffic along a small dead-end street, which will be hugely disruptive, and any mishap with such large vehicles could result in a similar situation to the one in 2024, or perhaps worse. That is what is driving the request to keep open the road access through the Christie's property so that Cleary Avenue would become a loop with 2 access intersections to Richmond Road. Current residents of Cleary Avenue are united in seeking to keep that route open during the construction of the proposed 2 towers and beyond. After 4 years of LRT construction, we are making a very reasonable request to avoid compounding and extending the existing traffic problems as this and other new buildings are constructed in our immediate neighborhood. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute today.
Thank you very much for your delegation. I'm not seeing any questions for you. Thank you for being here. Okay. Move on to our next delegation, Susan Glass, please.
Okay, there. You can hear me? Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members and fellow presenters and members of the public. I'm glad to be here representing the Woodruff North Community Association. And the primary area that I'm going to focus on is that boundary between the Woodruff North neighbors along Aylan Avenue and the western boundary of the church. And I thank the city planners for including in their planning report the landscape buffer along the western edge of the property. I'd just like to say that that buffer began 40 years ago when there was another zoning amendment hearing when Unitarian House was being built. And that zoning amendment went in as a contract between Woodruff North neighbors and the Unitarian campus. And in a letter I have here that was a covering letter to the bylaw, the then president of the Woodruff North Association talked about the difficulties that had been resolved. And she was hoping that that would be the end of the problems between Woodruff North and the Unitarian campus. Little did she know there would be then another rezoning when the childcare center was built, and now there's another rezoning again. So the thing about this bylaw from 1982 that said there shall be a 12-meter landscape strip at the end of the western end of the campus, and that would give privacy to the Aylen residents while they were bringing in this new Unitarian residence 40 years ago. It turns out that bylaw disappeared when amalgamation happened, so that 40-meter strip in a bylaw is no longer on the record. But the interesting thing is what is on the record is, for example, those 143 parking spaces that the planners refer to or the developer refers to came out of the same bylaw. And also that 13.8 meter height requirement came out of the same bylaw. So somehow at amalgamation, the city selectively dropped the green buffer out of that bylaw, but continued on with those zoning requirements for parking and height. So we're left without that bylaw, though unfortunately the city is therefore contributing to this opportunity for the developer to ignore the bylaw because it no longer exists. So fortunately, that landscape buffer is still being acknowledged on the south end of the western boundary, but on the north end of the western boundary, the OAHS building is being placed within that buffer at that 10.5 meter setback. I thoroughly welcome the OAHS building, but I don't welcome any building being placed in the buffer because, as we know, a buffer is a neutral zone between two separate territories, and it was not to be filled with any structure. So now the developer has gone on to plan this building that sits within that 12-meter zone. And in addition to that, the developer has planned to put a boardwalk within that buffer zone to increase the pedestrian experience of the campus. I want to emphasize that that buffer is meant to be a buffer between two neighborhoods. It's not meant to be a pedestrian walkway. And I really hope that this committee can help us out with that, because last year we had a meeting on the parking lot to see where the buildings were going to go. We were told about the boardwalk, and the Aylen neighbor said absolutely not. And then the developer said, okay, you're right, no boardwalk. And we were very pleased that we were listened to. But a year later, sure enough, without any prior consultation, the boardwalk shows up again. There was a lot of opposition to it at the April town hall, and now it is there in the final plan that's being submitted. My concern is that what's not in the plan that's being submitted is that mandatory walkway that is pedestrian and bikeway that's supposed to go from Richmond Road back to the Ottawa River Parkway.
I'll just note you are at time, so if you could quickly wrap up.
Okay, I will quickly wrap up. So I would like a guarantee beyond the statement in the planning report that the developer will make best efforts to make sure that walkway happens. I want to make sure that walkway happens and that the developer is not planning to use the buffer zone behind the OAHS building as a boardwalk walkway. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Susan, for coming out today. I will be proposing these questions to the developer as
Thank
well as
you.
staff. So,
Thank
but I
you.
want to thank you for your delegation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanaugh. I'm seeing no other questions. On to Bill White, please.
Madam Chair, committee members, thank you for the opportunity of being here in person today. First, to the good doctor and his associates, I just want to say how difficult it is I now understand what Barack Obama felt like coming up behind Michelle. Thank you for the opportunity to meet in person. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Bill White, and with my better half, Martha Turnbull, who you'll hear from later, we live at 45 Allen Avenue. We purchased our home in September 2023 and ultimately moved in December 2023. After months of looking in numerous towns and cities, we ultimately chose Ottawa. We chose to come to Ottawa because after looking at the plans for future development, we were in harmony with those plans. We purchased our property with the plan of putting a swimming pool in the yard for our grandchildren who visit often. With the original plans for setbacks and a 4-story building and protecting a green buffer zone, this created a situation that we were expecting. As well, we are looking at the erection now of a 16-story structure on reduced setbacks and encroachment on the green buffer zone that will pretty much rob us and all our neighbors to the north and south of any and all privacy in our backyards. Our neighborhood is made up of a large spread in ages, from a 6-day-old newborn, congratulations, Kieran, Pardeep, toddlers, school agers, mums, dads, grandparents, and great-grandparents. Having buildings with unobstructed views looking in our windows, onto our decks, and into our backyards is not what we signed on for. As well, it appears in the applicant's eyes that because we have have backyards deeper than most, reducing distance from homes to buildings should somehow make this more acceptable. I would remind you, we paid for those backyards. Furthermore, the claim is that the 6th-floor building is being constructed on an underused parking lot on the church property. As my back window looks directly onto that parking lot, I beg to differ that it is underused. It is used regularly throughout the week and extensively on the weekends. This leads to the question of parking. The design outline refers to the number of street parking spots in the surrounding neighborhoods. The streets in this neighborhood are not designed for outside residents of newly built structures to park there. As it is now, we have people going to the church, parking on Allen Avenue and Wayne Avenue as a few. I'm aware of this as I've been asked for directions to the church. The streets do not have sidewalks and there is minimal lighting. Any further vehicular traffic could pose problems for walkers, walkers with dogs, cyclists, and children playing in the area. I respectfully ask you to ask yourself if these buildings were being built in my backyard with the outlined impact on my family's privacy, destruction of green space, and diminishing property value. Could I support this rezoning request? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your delegation. I'm not seeing any questions for you. Thank you. Next, we have Martha Turnbull.
Madam Chair, Committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. As Bill has just said, we moved to Ottawa in the fall of 2023. Before I begin, though, I would like to recognize and congratulate the residents of Unitarian House for your eloquent speech and content in respect of health and safety on the site. I too have concerns about the health and safety on the site, but let me preface this with my background. I'm a registered nurse with over 40 years experience in the emergency department of urban care hospitals. In addition, I worked for a bank-owned insurance company as a senior claims leader for home, property, and travel claims. A lot of that was concurrent, so don't do the math. Currently, I work in the emergency department of a local Ottawa hospital. Granted, I'm new to Ottawa. However, I don't know any other location in the city providing housing for seniors in assisted living, daycare center, Aboriginal housing, and rental towers in one unique place with one single entrance and exit. As a recipient or the receiver of patients who come in by ambulance that are delayed on scene because of access issues, I can tell you, I share the concerns of the Unitarian House residents. This is something that needs to clearly be addressed. The proposed site plan is a unique multi-generational living environment with critical risks that must be assessed methodically and planned for using a risk management focus, given the unique and current future use of this land, including traffic flow, cycle paths, and reduction of infectious disease risk. Let's look at the populations that we expect to see in this environment. We've got the residents in the apartment buildings. It's reasonable to expect they will be all ages. With children and teenagers. Children and teenagers are risk takers. They don't understand necessarily safety and they're a bit impulsive. According to a US study, in the 15 to 19-year-old cohort, 37.9% of all deaths in this cohort was a result of unintentional injury. That does not include overdoses, illnesses, or other causes of death. This is very relevant to the Cleary Avenue project, as key elements such as footpaths, bike lanes, and roadways are not designed safely given the current site plans. Design matters. Design of walkways, cycle path, roadways, along with recreational spaces can either save lives, enhance health, as my colleagues from the Unitarian House have identified, and prevent injuries or contribute to death, injury, and burden to the individual families and the healthcare system, both during and after construction. The River Parkway Children's Center is a unique facility. It's really neat. I wish my kids were able to go to a center like that. At a high level, this is a high-risk population due to their size and developmental characteristics. These are impulsive individuals and often not seen by cyclists, seniors, and motorists. Injury is the leading cause of death and a major cause of morbidity among children aged 14 and less in Canada, as reported by StatsCan. Design must include safety for children when outside the daycare facility and other recreational areas for those residents as well. Crossing bike paths, walkways, and drivers places kids at risk, as well as other facility users, both during and after construction. Design matters. Design of walkways, cycle paths, and roads along recreational spaces will save lives, enhance health, prevent injuries, or contribute negatively to death and dismemberment or death and disability during and after construction. With full respect to my colleagues at the Unitarian House, many residents, as noted, have pre-existing advanced age or advancing age and pre-existing medical condition. I personally observed these residents walking around and enjoy their mobility and safely navigating the parking lot. But it is important to note that hip fractures are a common cause of injury in the elderly. And over the age of 65, they are a leading health concern. Hip fractures are associated with significant mortality, loss of independence, and financial burden. In the usual care, the one-year mortality rate ranges from 14 to 58%. Design matters. During and after construction, design of walkways, cycle path, and roadways along recreational spaces will either save lives, enhance health of individuals, and prevent injuries, or contribute to their demise. Hence, it would be worthwhile considering, assessing, and planning to move the building sites back closer to the church to enable segregated walkways and cycle paths to prevent illness and injuries and further catastrophic head injuries such as head injuries. Gardens can be moved. Trees can be replanted to along the green buffer zone along the A-Lim properties.
Sorry to interrupt. You are at time. If you could quickly wrap up.
Yes, I can. So expecting high-risk groups such as seniors and with mobility device, potentially cognitive vision issues and handicaps, as well as preschoolers to navigate a woodruff pathways demonstrates a clear lack of understanding. In my mind, this council, city planners, and this committee have a fiduciary responsibility to the residents and visitors to Cleary property to provide a safe environment and demand planning by the developer that reflects this, including management of West Nile virus in the stagnant water ponds.
Thank you very much for your delegation. We have a question from Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to thank you for your delegation. We will be asking questions to our planners regarding safety. It's been a theme, and we want to make sure that it is safe. So I want to thank you for your delegation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to further add that the infectious disease risk associated with stagnant water ponds and bird baths on the property present a risk that needs to be considered. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ottawa Public Health Site actually notes that specifically.
Thank you. Our next delegation is Alan Ramsey, who I believe is joining us online.
Good afternoon. It's just after 12. I have a presentation, which if I could get that loaded up, that'd be great. My name is Alan Ramsey, and my firm has been retained by a group of residents in the area and asked to provide an independent planning opinion. I did so, and I provided a detailed planning brief to the city on July 25th, 2024. And I believe that a copy of that planning brief has been provided to members of council. Next slide, please. So what's before you is an application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw. And as we've heard, it's a 6-story building and a 16-story building. And that the official plan amendment involves changes to the transition requirements within the mixed-use institutional zone, and that the zoning bylaw changes involve adding mid-rise apartment and high-rise apartments as permitted uses, and changing the height and standards, amongst other things. Next slide, please. In terms of the site context, the site is a suitable location for infill and intensification. This site, just to be clear, this site is an appropriate location for intensification. It's in close proximity to rapid transit systems. It's also located adjacent to an established residential low-rise area. And just to be clear, the property does not front onto Richmond Road. Next slide, please. In terms of the planning context, we've heard that the lands are designated neighborhood and are part of the evolving neighborhood overlay area. And one of the factors in that in those policies is the need to address a gradual change in character in areas close to hubs and corridors. Next slide, please. In terms of the secondary plan, the secondary plan vision is quite clear. Intensification will be compatible and complement adjacent neighborhoods with an emphasis on human scale pedestrian interaction. Furthermore, the vision states the scale and character of existing neighborhoods will be preserved through appropriate height transitions. Next slide, please. Within the secondary, as I said, the plans are designated institutional mixed use. The secondary plan, that designation does permit buildings of up to 16 stories, and it does include an existing transition policy that defines a 30-meter depth from the property line and requires a minimum setback of 7.5 meters. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute or two. And what's being proposed is to introduce a transition policy that's based solely on setbacks, no stepbacks, nothing else than simply setbacks. Next slide, please. As I've stated in my planning brief, this proposal does not conform with the above requirements of the secondary plan, particularly the vision. The proposal does not result in compatibility with the proposed built form with the adjacent low-rise residential to the west, and the proposal will cause adverse privacy and overlook issues, resulting in incompatible development. From a planning perspective, the biggest concern to me is height and transition, and the city's urban design guidelines define transition as a gradual change in pattern from one to another. And in my opinion, the 16-story building with a 14 meter setback to the 1.5, and 2-story buildings to the west does not represent a gradual transition. It is an abrupt rather than a gradual change. Next slide, please. And what I've done is I've provided what the urban design guidelines identify as appropriate transition using both setbacks and angular plane. So typically everything above those dashed lines would represent development that would result in compatibility issues, privacy issues, overlook issues. Clearly, in this case here, the proposal would not have regard for the city's urban design guidelines, which are intended to deal with those matters of privacy and overlook. Next slide, please. The other issue.
Sorry, sir, you are at time. If you could just wrap up quickly.
Okay, so I just have two things I'd like to do. Then one is to quickly identify. This is a drone photograph taken from the 6-story level into the rear yards of the properties to the west. Clearly, there are going to be privacy and overlook issues. Lastly, if you go to the last page of the presentation, that would be great. And I'll just wrap up. So if you go to page 12 of the presentation, that would be great. Thank you. So in terms of my conclusions and recommendations, in my opinion, the proposed development is not compatible with the well-established character of the low-rise residential area to the west. The tower lacks appropriate transition and will result in privacy and overlook issues. The proposal does not conform with the vision guiding principles of the secondary plan, and that a transition policy to a low-rise residential area based on setbacks alone will establish an unacceptable precedent, and that a transition policy based on setbacks and
Okay, I'm gonna have to cut you off there, but we can see your final points on the screen.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here today. We have a question for you from Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Ramsey, for your presentation. We will be asking questions to the developer and to staff, and we will ask about the angular plane as well as the other points you have raised. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no other questions. Thank you very much for joining us today. We will go to Pardeep Kunar, who I believe is also joining us online. Welcome, Pardeep.
Yeah, sorry, I meant to be there in person, but I have a newborn just last week. So thanks, Bill, for the shout out, which kind of, leads me to my point. I'll keep it short, I think. So I know the property in question really well, actually. I walk my son to daycare every morning at the River Parkway Daycare, and I think it's a great institution. I've made a lot of friends on those walks, residents from the Unitarian House. And it is really a nice community to have in my backyard. I live at 43 Aylin, so I'm on the western property line. I will say this, I'm super disappointed with the process as a result of the new legislation that's come in from Mr. Ford, who I likely will never ever vote for again. Prior to these new rules coming in place, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that if an official plan came into effect, you could not amend it within a 2-year period. But now, within the new regulations, that's all out the window. And it's kind of my opinion that the planners within the city, who I pay taxes to pay for their salaries, and as everyone else does on this call, are really forced and have their hands tied to push these proposals forward, whether they conform or don't conform to an official plan or not. And I, in fact, think and believe that this doesn't conform, as Alan just mentioned previously, to the official plan and the secondary plan that goes into. If you haven't read it, councillors, read that document, and it clearly highlights the western property line and sort of how that should be handled in terms of built form, setbacks, transition zones that we've been talking about. But I don't think it abides by that. And if it did, we wouldn't be amending it, right? That's the piece that I think is not rubbing well with me. So for example, you could build a 4-story building behind my house with a 7.5 meter setback, which is less than what they're proposing, and not need an official plan amendment. But yet here we are requesting official plan amendment for, extra stories. So I guess I question that. So kind of going back to my son and walking him to daycare every day, I do it in the morning and I pick him up at the end of the day at 4 o'clock. And what's really fun about that is all the kids come out and they play on the property. And in fact, we almost on a daily basis go into the gardens. And I'm really mindful of having my son not ride his bike in there, not to throw rocks, not to jump off the benches. These are all things kids do. And I would say I'm really respectful of those gardens. They're great. They're a great place to be. But I'm not respectful of the gardens because they have mature trees. And I'm not respectful of the gardens because they have a stream running through it. In fact, this is probably where I'm going to offend people. The stream is stagnant. The trees are pretty immature. The garden's okay, award-winning. I'd question that, to be perfectly honest. But why I'm respectful of it, and I'm going to call it out right here, is it's a memorial. There are memorial plots within these gardens. I know this, I'm in them every day. And this is why we've asked the question on why not push the buildings back. And it's in my opinion that these gardens are not gardens. They're memorials, and there's been a promise made to the congregation that these gardens will not be touched. And it should not come at the detriment to the property owners to the west. Effectively, the church, in my opinion, wants their cake and wants to eat it at the same time, and to the cost of neighbors. And this is coming from someone who really enjoys the property and likes it. My son, 6 days old, will also likely go to that daycare, and I walk my dog through there. And I really believe that my ask to the councillors is to not carry this forward, ask the developer to go back and amend this particular proposal and push those buildings into appropriate places where everybody can be happy. I'm for densification. I believe something is going to get built behind my house. I welcome it. I think the densification up through Richmond will be great. I look forward to more shops and coffee shops and things where we can all have a great community, but you can't sacrifice all these plans that have been put in place and upset people because of this. And I think I'm going to call it out. Spade is a spade. That's what I see when I go into the gardens. And I think there are rumors out there that there's ashes in those gardens as well. So yeah, I'll yield my time.
Thank you very much for your delegation. I'm not seeing any questions for you, but congratulations on the new addition to your family.
Thank you.
Okay, our final delegation is Bob Armstrong.
There. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm a bit moved by all of the things I've heard because I come to you as a very lowly member of the church who has no responsibilities for decisions. I am a volunteer. I'm a 20-year member of the First Unitarian Congregation, and I spend 2 to 4 days a week in the church volunteering for a lot of administrative things. So on that administrative point, I will say that I was surprised to hear some of the numbers floated around in some of the delegations. For example, we have a membership of 40 people. I maintain the database for the church. I can tell you we have more than 300 fully voting members, and we have many more non-members who are very active in the church. And I know that because I produce the church directory in which I record the names and addresses of all the members and those non-members who are active in church activities. So I'd like to correct that number that was floated around of our membership. So I have, as I say, been there for 20 years, become very close. It's my spiritual home. But I do want to start off by thanking my counselor, because I live in Ambleside and therefore she is my counselor. And I'm very pleased at the balanced approach she's taking to this whole thing. And your regular updates are fantastic. Thank you. The thing is that I am, as I say, a volunteer in my church. I have volunteered for a number of things at Unitarian House because they're very close to us. And I am on the list to go into Unitarian House. I may look old, but I'm only 81, so therefore I'm planning to move to Unitarian House. And I have hopes, my wife and I have hopes that we will be residents of Unitarian House within the year. That is our hope and our plan. Now, I agree that a second entrance would be nice to have, particularly during the construction. But I will be in Unitarian House as a resident for all of the construction, because I want to move in there and I'll probably spend the rest of my life there. So, but I firmly feel that the importance of what we are doing and proposing for reconciliation, for affordable housing, and the intensification of accommodations close to LRT stations, 200 meters away. That is so important. I worry that all the other concerns, which I support, they all are meaningful. But isn't this proposal really important to what the city wants? Reconciliation, affordable housing, and intensification close to LRT stations. And I worry that what's being proposed is to somehow put conditions on this proposal that might delay it ever happening and maybe even scuttle the plan completely. So I'm begging the committee, please look carefully at the relative values of what needs to be done here. Yes, I'm going to be in Unitarian House and I'm not going to like all that traffic past my window. But on the other hand, I believe that as a human being, it is my responsibility to help other human beings and to do things like put up with that for a few years. So I'll use my time and close it here by begging you, please don't throw the babies out with the bathwater. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've got a question for you from Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much for your delegation. I appreciate you correcting the record on how many members there are in the congregation. I think that's helpful for people to know. And we'll be asking questions soon to the applicant and to staff on some of the issues that have been raised. But thank you for your perspective. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your delegation, and thank you for to all of you for your delegations. I'll also note we did have correspondence received by the committee on this item, as did we for 5.1 and 5.2, which I did not note. But that's it for delegations. So we will now hear from the applicant. We have Tyler Yakachuk from FOTEN. Whenever you're ready.
Good morning. My name is Roberto Campos, and I'm a partner with Figure Architects and the architects for this project. Good morning, Chair, councillors, and members of planning staff. On behalf of our entire team, we thank you for the opportunity. Oh, do we have a presentation? Yeah, thank you. On behalf of our entire team, we'd like to thank you for the opportunity to allow us to speak on this very important project. Members of our team will describe the various aspects that guided our proposal with the goals of a project that really does meet the intents of and the visions of the secondary plan and the official plan. Next slide, please. A project that was developed with as much community engagement and client consultation as possible, and with the goals of providing a great project that can become an example of how faith-based owned lands can evolve to create complete communities with the inclusion of much needed housing and especially deeply affordable housing. Next slide. From our initial visions that defined our definitions of success to the very clear mandate of preserving existing gardens and green spaces that have been meticulously cared for by members of this campus and congregation for decades. Next slide. The site planning of the buildings balances the savings of these gardens and not only preserving the green spaces along the western property line, but enhancing them. The buildings and foundation setbacks at over 10 meters for the mid-rise, 14 meters at the tower podium, and 60 meters at the tower ensure that existing green spaces not only remain, but will be enhanced through further landscape design measures. The buildings will sit on over 16,000 square feet of existing paved asphalt. Next slide. Pedestrian safety and the at-grade experience has always been a key priority for our team in the development of the urban design. Access to existing and new pathways and the introduction of a Woonor loop from the future pedestrian access at 809 Richmond and throughout the new development provides a street calming measure that prioritizes people. Next slide. The relocation of the parking garage ramp access was also relocated through the design development after discussions with members of the daycare and community to minimize everyday vehicular traffic towards new development. I'll now pass it to Tyler from FOTEN to continue the discussion with regards to zoning.
Okay, thanks. Next slide, please. So looking specifically at the official plan amendment here, there's been, as planning staff have noted, the transition zone has been a point of contention, specifically because the 30-meter transition zone is not a defined term, whether in the Planning Act, official plan, zoning bylaw, secondary plan. This isn't a term that exists. So what we are looking to do here is two things. First, respect that this is a rather intangible term. We viewed this as we were providing a distance of up to 35.6 meters of an average setback from the proposed building to the existing housing stock at the rear, as well as to establish tangible, definable setbacks as identified here with 14 meters from the market building, the taller building, 16 stories, and 10.5 from the OHS house. So what we're trying to do is replace an intangible, undefinable item by legally establishing the defined amount of space that we wish to build on. Next slide, please. Now, we recognize that every development application is adjudicated on its own merit. We wanted to point out some recently approved development applications within the same transect, and most notably 809 Richmond, very close to this property, where you can see that there are certainly high-rise developments that are built within a low-rise or in close context to low-rise development. I should note that 809 Richmond has a 3-meter tower setback from the abutting low-rise property. 1655 has an 11-meter rear yard setback from existing low-rise property. And 2026 Scott has a 5-meter setback from low-rise property. I'm pointing these out to identify that while the angular plane is something that should be considered, it is not the end-all and be-all. And with these properties, they looked at other things such as tower separation, floor plate, shadow impacts, which we have done on this site as well to establish the appropriate transition. Next slide, please. Now we're handing it off to Rodney Wiltz to take it from here.
Thanks, and thanks to the committee for taking the time today and everyone coming out. This is an important project. We believe more than anything you've seen today, and maybe more than anything you've seen this year, this project responds to the big directives in the official plan in terms of where the city wants to go. Next slide. Oh, first of all, this project is first and foremost about intensification at the LRT station, at the Sherbourne LRT station. We're directly across the street, 115-meter walk to that Sherbourne LRT station, and is about transit-oriented development. Next slide. This is about the delivery of affordable housing. We're incredibly blessed to be partnered with Ontario Aboriginal Housing. Kathy spoke about that. We have 66 nonprofit affordable housing units as part of this development, as well as doing market affordable housing. This is really about providing a full spectrum of affordable housing on the site. And we're excited about that. Next slide. This is about a tangible step towards reconciliation, including as part of it, Indigenous partners providing off-reserve affordable housing and doing that in a culturally appropriate fashion. It was really intentional to take the best part of the site and dedicate that towards Indigenous nonprofit housing in close proximity to the Ottawa River. Next slide. And this is about creating a sustainability showpiece. I know there's going to be lots of questions about why did we choose to locate the buildings where they are, but a huge piece of that was about preserving the mature green spaces that exist on the property, preserving those mature trees that the neighbors love and enjoy. And this is also about creating a low carbon development. So we're planning a geo-exchange district energy system. This is about low carbon lifestyles where people can take transit, prioritizing pedestrians and bikes over the cars, certainly. So next slide. So really, we're urging approval. This is about the completion of the little village that is the First Unitarian campus. There are seniors there. There's a daycare there. This is about creating a full mix of uses, along with a beloved community partner. First U has been doing incredible work in the community for decades. You've heard little snippets about some of the work that they're doing, and this development helps ensure their viability for the very long term. So I know there's lots of questions, but maybe with that, that ends our presentation and open it up for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. First is Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much to you all. We've been through a few meetings, and I appreciate there has been some changes. Obviously, there's still concerns, but some efforts have been made in terms of like the parking garage, et cetera, the entrance. So I may have to go on a couple of times. So I'm just going to start off with the request from Unitarian House about the second exit. Is it possible to consider the path to also be a private driveway? And is the applicant willing to negotiate that? Because that would be private property. That would be going through 809 Richmond, which has already been designated for 24 stories. Has this been considered, and is this being looked at right now?
We've certainly had lots of discussions with the neighbors. We've had preliminary conversations with the owners of 8009 Richmond. Two of the primary objectives around this development are around affordability and about sustainability. Both of those efforts likely get hampered by trying to add a second vehicular access. As has been noted, that site is already zoned for high-rise residential. I would argue that's a good use of that site, directly across from an LRT station. So trying to burden this project with the cost and expense of adding a second vehicular access when the reports state that it's not required, it would be punitive to the project. So, but we have committed in discussions with the city, in discussions with the neighbors, in ensuring that there would be a pedestrian access, and really trying to prioritize the pedestrian first and foremost.
Okay, thank you. The reason this is being raised is safety concerns. And there's two parts of it. One is the construction phase. So possibly even looking at a lease. If 809 Richmond isn't going ahead right away, they might be interested in a lease. I can't speak for them, but that's what they did with stage 2 LRT. I don't know if people know, but that was a short-term lease to replace Cleary entrance. And the reason the Cleary entrance had to be blocked is because of major water main work that is at that particular spot. So, which had to be done before the LRT construction. So it's massive, and there was just no way they could use that exit. But what about during construction only?
We're certainly willing to enter into negotiations to see whether we could make something work. The key issue again is about affordability, so ensuring that we could do that in some kind of cost-effective fashion during construction. But we've expressed an openness to try and explore and see whether something can be done. And of course, it's also contingent on when this project would move forward and what the owners of 8009 Richmond, what their timelines would look like.
Yeah, and it should be mentioned that the city does not play a role in that. That is not city property, and it's not a city road. It would be a private road if that were the case, just so people know. You mentioned about a WUNRF, and just so people know, for those who don't, can you describe how it's going to work?
Yeah, maybe we can go back to the presentation because there is a slide that shows a landscape plan that even shows, if you go back more, keep going. Keep going. Right here. So we can look at this slide and we can look at the next slide. I think a pretty tangible example here in Ottawa is obviously Lansdowne Park, right? It's the idea that you're not creating these very segregated separations of traffic lanes versus pedestrian lanes versus bike lanes through a series of elevation changes or barriers and stuff like that. Like the idea of a WUNRF is actually a very common traditional thing that you see a lot in Europe and stuff, where people do just have to share the road with vehicular cars, whether they're on a bike or whether they're walking. And so, as you can see, Lansdowne Park is a pretty good example and a pretty good one because there's actually quite a lot of retail that's there. So there's a huge amount of influx of cars and people all happening at the same time. In this case here, we don't have that retail issue, so we're really happy that we're not going to be seeing that level of traffic. But the idea is really that as opposed to creating, okay, here's a paved bike lane that is almost like a track that you follow. The idea here is that this actually the use of as you can see here, the paving patterns and creating zones for cars to drive on or to park at certain times of the day, or people using the space, whether coming from the LRT station through to the space, it's all one surface. But we do provide additional measures such as bollards in certain areas for people who do want that extra level of safety if they feel like, hey, I don't necessarily want to walk through the space. Right now, people are literally taking their everyday walks through an existing parking lot. Like they're basically walking on a roadway all the time. So I think the idea here is that we're actually creating a much broader, larger path from 809 Richmond right to basically the start of NCC lands.
Well, it's a common concern by residents everywhere about traffic and speed, et cetera. This is a private property. So you guys are looking after your own situation for reducing speed and so slowing down traffic and making it safe. Is there any other measures you can take that would make it safer, particularly with this very vulnerable population? You've got both extremes. You've got a childcare center as where, kids are unpredictable. You've got a building full of seniors where they're very predictable and they're going to be going very slowly and carefully. What are you doing particularly for those situations?
Yeah, like I think a big strong one that we actually took was the relocation of the underground parking ramp, right? Like we actually explored that, in three kind of different locations. Obviously the site is what the site is, and there's only limited locations where we can do it. The original location of that parking ramp was between the taller building right next to the daycare, and it worked. Obviously, it was the best locations from an actual functionality of the parking garage ramp, but it, over discussions with members of the community and members of the daycare, was that there was obviously a concern to having adding this additional vehicular traffic in front of the daycare. And so that was one big move that we've obviously changed, where we've now located that parking garage ramp. Basically, you could see it at the very top, coming right off the Cleary Road area. So it doesn't actually need to come in. People who live in the residence and are going to access the parking garage don't actually have to loop around or come through in front of the daycare. They'll actually access the ramp immediately at the most eastern part of the property line. So that was probably one of the largest moves that we did to kind of help alleviate that traffic in front of the daycare for obviously safety concerns there.
And during construction, which is, big heavy vehicles, is there any special measures you can take during that particular time period? For example, having permanent flag people during the time or something along that line?
Yeah, safety during construction is paramount, and we do recognize we have vulnerable populations. I've been doing development for 20 years, almost all infill, some at zero lot line in very heavy pedestrian environments, downtown Hindenburg. And so ensuring that we put in place a whole host of safety measures from training of our subcontractors, looking at the use example of jersey barriers during construction to delineate pedestrian spaces. I know there was people mentioning concerns earlier about, being on the sidewalk and construction traffic and people with visual or hearing impairments. So, we've had success in the past with that kind of jersey barrier to just ensure that, people aren't accidentally stepping off the sidewalk in a place where they might not otherwise be aware. So those would be the kinds of measures, and we would put in place a detailed safety plan during construction. We've been very fortunate, and it's because of the effort we put into it to have never had a construction-related accident. And we would work with the rest of the campus members to ensure that continues.
So you'll work with Unitarian House?
Absolutely.
Okay, and the childcare center, I should mention.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to switch gears if I have time. In terms of the angular plane, this is the proximity of the buildings to the properties on Aylan Avenue. This has obviously been very contentious, and it's unprecedented that you're using the actual buildings as the marker rather than the property lines, which has traditionally been what the measurement has been. This is a concern. This is actually a question more for city staff. Is this precedent setting? Because that question was raised by residents.
Through you, Madam Chair, we certainly review each application on its own merits, and it's a lot of it is context specific. I think overall, right, staff do come to committee and council a lot of the time advocating for 45-degree angular plane, but some of the thinking behind our rationale on why it may not be as applicable here, I could go over them now, or if you want me to, do you want me to go over the rationale at this point?
Yes.
Okay. Madam Coordinator, would you be able to pull up the staff slide deck? Going to the
Maybe
second-
Councillor Kavanaugh, if we could finish our questions to the applicant and then we'll move to questions to staff, if that's
sure.
okay.
All right.
Just so we don't have to flip between the
All
two.
right, we'll go. Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Sorry
Okay,
about that.
we'll hold off on that. Okay. In terms of back to the applicant, the positioning of the buildings has been the number one concern. It's, we know that they could not be put on the south corridor because of water mains, but why could they not have been angled differently so that they're not feeling like a wall to the people on Aylan Avenue?
This has certainly been probably the toughest part of the process over the last couple of years. As you mentioned, we've had quite a few meetings, design sessions, charrette sessions, there's multiple meetings with various members of planning staff on this particular issue. To engineering staff from the city, right? We at the very beginning, we obviously look at, okay, well, if we had a blank slate and could do whatever we want, where would we put buildings and things like that get looked at. But once you start to overlay all of these other, what we would say, I guess, are influencers on a particular site, such as infrastructure, existing infrastructure, right? There is this discussion, why aren't we putting these buildings closer to the Richmond side on the south side of the property? Well, one, we knew that there was going to be significant densification happening along Richmond, like 809 Richmond into the future. But the biggest aspect there was a significant amount of below grade infrastructure that is happening there. There's obviously a massive water main trunk line that's happening there, that's servicing like that. That's just a no-go, right? As a team, we always looked at sustainability as one of the biggest and strongest influencers on the site. That's why that's what makes this campus such a beautiful campus is the fact that there's these beautiful existing trees and gardens, access to NCC. And so, for us to then say, well, let's just put the buildings further away from the western lot, but let's kill some gardens that have been there for decades and been meticulously maintained, with huge mature trees, just also doesn't make sense. And so, we did look at various aspects of changing the geometry of the buildings, but then other influencers came in, such as, emergency vehicle access, and fire truck turnaround requirements. So, what you see on the screen isn't the first iteration of this project. It actually has gone through a significant amount of testing and exploration and site planning, but all having to balance, all of these needs, from shadow studies to the, again, yes, absolutely, the proximity to the western property line, but all of these things. And at the end, it really did make sense that this is the location where we're now actually going to build, we're proposing to build on 16,000 square feet of asphalt, right? It's just, ultimately, that's the way it makes sense. Can we angle the building a little bit? We've tried to look at it. It certainly starts to, again, encroach on other things, such as its proximity to gardens, the change in the structure of the building. Changing a building's angle does actually have other aspects that it affects, such as construction costs, which, as Ronnie pointed out, we're trying to really make this a deeply affordable project overall. And when we start adding all these things, we have to find a balanced solution in the end.
Thank you. And you mentioned, so you would lose trees if you had it on a different angle. That's one thing you said.
100%.
And also there was
big
concerns.
trees. it changes how we can actually provide clean access to the site. Like the ring road that you're seeing, you know, from the top all the way around has been completely designed specifically to address the fact that we do need emergency vehicular access, fire trucks, ambulances, garbage, all of that stuff. It has got to be looked at. As soon as you start changing things and the building moves, then you actually have to run different scenarios and different approaches. And now you've got this massive, huge, you know, cul-de-sac turnaround that has to be designed specifically to allow for that potential that a fire truck might have to show up, right? So
thank you. I have more questions, but I'm going to let my colleagues speak and see if there's any wrap up after. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kavanaugh, Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Chair. I do have 3 questions. We heard from one of the delegates on the panel that you have had discussions with neighboring entities regarding an access in and out of Richmond. What was the context of those discussions? What made you reach out to those entities to have a discussion? You've said at great length that a second access point would cause undue financial pressure and it add cost to this project. But why did you have those conversations to begin with?
I think even the delegations that aren't in favor of the development would attest that we've done a lot of work to engage deeply with the community, as we do on all of our projects. So we've had lots of site walk rounds. We've done a series of open houses. We've pushed and pulled the buildings. We've heard lots of different advisement from different people, and certainly that's one of the things we've heard was that people would prefer to see a second access. And so, you know, we do take it seriously when we hear feedback and look to explore.
I'm trying to get though to the heart of those conversations. Did you sit down at a table and ask questions about how that would be feasible, whether the current private property owner would be open to selling that access? Like, what was your motivation when you sat down to have those conversations? Was it truly because you were interested in the feasibility of a second access? Did you just want to tell the public you did it to check it off your list? What was the context of those conversations?
Yeah, we have actively done a costing exercise to look at what it would cost to add a second entrance. So that was not a superficial exercise. And rest assured, it does not come inexpensively.
And is it fair to say, though, that your team has concluded that a second access is not something you're willing to pursue?
Correct.
Okay, fair enough. There was reference to one of the speakers sort of late on the list about a walkway, differentiating between a boardwalk on the far western side of the property line versus a walkway. And she was passionate that the walkway will proceed. Can you shed some light on this matter?
Yeah, so I think what we're really looking at is you can see on the very bottom of the screen behind the buildings. You know, we had used the word in our concepts earlier on as a boardwalk, but I think we got to be very clear in what we're kind of defining. This is not going to be like the Atlantic City boardwalk or, you know, Brighton Beach type, like, you know, these big massive boardwalks with tons of people. We're talking about maybe a 3-foot wood deck that kind of runs and primarily behind the OHS building that is really trying to be sensitive to the existing green landscaping that is there. There's also a natural stormwater pathway that's there. So, you know, I think part of it was how do we create an ability for, again, how, you know, people are using the space, the pedestrians are using the space right now. Like we mentioned, people are taking their daily walks in the middle of a parking lot. And so how do we create these differences of experiences, whether it's through the Wooner, through the existing pathways in the gardens, to walking around the buildings, you know, on a little deck path. That's really what we're talking about. Behind the larger building, which is setback, roughly about another 3.5 to 4 meters from where OHS is against the western property line. We do have to provide a cleared service path there because there is emergency exit doors that serve the building itself that lead out. So we have to provide safe passage there as required by the Ontario Building Code. So, but to be very clear, we're not expecting this to be a place where buskers are hanging out and like that. It's not what it is. It really is just a simple path. I would expect maybe 3-4 people a day might use it on their occasional pass. Like this is a pretty minimal intervention.
Okay, that helps me understand that better. And just for context, again, the bottom side of this illustration is the property lines of ALIN. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so once these buildings are built, is your intent to provide additional green buffer along this western periphery? Are you planning to add additional trees to provide additional privacy and try and replant some of the trees that will come down?
Yeah, like I'm not a landscape architect, so I won't speak to that level of specificity. But the idea that where we've located the buildings, in many cases the setback is about above grade. From a zoning perspective, from a code perspective, we can build right up to property line. But in this case, we actually have chosen to build exactly where those buildings are and no further, even below grade. And that is intentionally to preserve as much of the root structure that is there, the green spaces that are there. If I recall correctly, and maybe Todd can correct me or not, but some of the existing vegetation is not doing well and is going to have to be removed. But our intention is always to reinvigorate that with new plantings as well. But all the mature stuff, we've, specifically have been very meticulous in locating the building to actually be away from root structures. It is our intention from a, construction perspective that we're actually going to treat this as if you're building this in a downtown site where you've got an office building literally a foot away from the property line or right on property. So we're actually going to shore our processes as if we're in a downtown site up against other high rises. So in order to make sure that we can preserve as much of the below grade root structure as possible.
All right, thank you. I appreciate the answers to the questions. I'll just note, as part of the site plan, if all parties could just note the request for additional trees and foliage along that western periphery. I think that will assist. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I had 4 questions here, but Councillor Kavanagh seems to have asked them, and Councillor Brockington asked the last one. So I'm really left with, when we get applications like this in front of us, I think about, okay, so if we were to reject this application and say, we'd like the buildings to be rotated some more, we'd like the second access, we'd like to have this boardwalk rethought out. What would the OLT think about that? And that's my question to Tim Mark. I always like to ask that. What would the OLT, or what do you think would happen if this committee actually rejected this application at this state?
Councillor Curry, is that a question to staff? We're doing questions to staff next. We're gonna then finish up with the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Mark. Can you spend some time thinking about that?
Okay, great. We got a preview. Do you have any questions for the applicant? Okay, I'm seeing no other questions, so thank you for being here. And we will now move on to questions to staff. So we can start with Councillor Curry. Over to you, Tim Mark.
What I said.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll take the opportunity first, because this is one of the first applications that committee has heard since June, to remind the committee that with the changes made by Bill 185, the only one who can appeal this is in fact the applicant. The ability of third parties to appeal zoning bylaws that don't affect their lands was removed by Bill 185. But the applicant does have a right of appeal. And so if committee were to turn it down, first of all, committee has to provide reasons. And the way that typically is done is legal services staff work with the council who brought the motion to have the item turned down develop reasons, and those are delivered to council. That's the process by which we do it. So the reasons would have to be identified. And you have heard from the representatives of the applicant today as to why they've been unable to address some of the concerns that have been raised by community. And if the matter is turned down, then legal services would have to find somebody who was able to substantiate those reasons on either a planning or architectural basis. And so committee, I would suggest, would have to weigh whether or not what they've heard from the applicant is well-founded. And if it is well-founded, then the OLT is likely to allow an appeal to the, if the applicant does so.
So, Madam Chair, I mean, from what I've heard and what I know has taken place in the community, I don't think we would have a good argument. I think we have seen that there have been considerations made already prior. And that's one of the things I always say about in Canada North. We always do the, considerably upfront, thoughtful, changes. Could we change this? Could we change that? So that those things can be thought through and the community can understand what the rationale is for why they can or can't. And the developer has the opportunity to do some of the things potentially. And I feel like that has happened. I feel like the who we've heard from here has explained why they can't do some of the things that they have been asked to do and look at. And I mean, we've also heard, which is nice, Councillor Kavanagh, her community member saying that, they appreciate how much time and effort she's put in this as well to make sure that all ideas are looked at. So I don't see any real planning rationale that we could come up with as a committee for why we wouldn't approve this. So I would just make that comment. And I thank everybody for all the time and effort to think through this and present it to us today.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Troster.
Thank you so much. Just a quick, so it seems that one of the key concerns hinges on wanting to compel the applicant to guarantee a second access with a private landowner. And my question to city staff is, as a committee or as a city, do we have the power to compel an applicant to do such a thing, to negotiate a secondary access with a private landowner?
Madam Chair, I guess I was going to say the former city solicitor, but it's actually going back to Mr. O'Connor always cautioned me to avoid the use of the word never. And so I respect Mr. O'Connor's advice, when what I will say is it is extremely difficult to impose through zoning a requirement that can only be achieved through the acquiescence of a third party.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to make a few comments because I really do appreciate all the time and energy that everybody brought to committee today. I think we heard from people who deeply care about this site. I know the site really well. My own synagogue actually runs out of the Unitarian Church. We share space, so I'm on that campus quite often. One of the challenges of intensification is the proximity to construction, which is something that we deal with constantly in my ward, because I do represent the most densely packed ward with, I believe, the highest rate of development. It might be in competition with Kitchissippi ward. So we often see construction concerns brought to this committee. And, as much as we'd like to believe otherwise, there's no form of construction that won't be impactful to nearby residents. And I know that Councillor Kavanagh's office will be really sensitive to working with the applicant and with city staff to mitigate as much as possible, but it's tough. Living near a large building being built right beside you is hard, and I just want to acknowledge that. But I am just so impressed by the vision associated with this project. It represents a real commitment to Indigenous reconciliation, to land back. It is an opportunity to turn a parking lot into housing and also to preserve valuable green space. I'd like to see more of this. And I think also we often see transportation concerns come to Planning and Housing Committee. It's a constant chicken and egg scenario. And I think what we're dealing with right now, and it is completely understandable, is a disbelief in transit-oriented development because people are very frustrated with their public transit system right now. But these buildings will be 200 meters from an LRT station, and low-income housing, 200 meters from an LRT station is unlikely to create a ton more vehicular traffic, because generally speaking, folks who live in these kinds of apartments may not own a car or may choose to move there so they don't have to use one. And so as we're trying to push forward a forward-thinking vision of transit-oriented development, I find we're often hit with concerns about an increase in car traffic. And based on what I've read and what I've seen, I am not convinced that it will have a dramatic impact on the site. But just to be clear, one more question to staff. Can this conversation about access through a third party, can that be negotiated through the site plan process?
Madam Chair, I'll start off, and if planning wishes to add, by all means, please do so. Our authority, the city's authority under Section 41, dealing with third-party matters, is no greater than the authority under Section 34 for zoning. As a theoretical matter, can discussions continue? Yes, they can continue, but the statutory backing is not likely there.
Okay. So in other words, we don't have the power to force this to happen, certainly not through Planning and Housing Committee and through accepting or denying a zoning bylaw amendment. But, you know, I've heard what sounds like a good faith commitment from the applicant to work on this, especially through the construction phase. So I think that's a really positive impact that came from all of this community involvement. And I just want to commend Councillor Kavanaugh for handling this so sensitively with the community, because this is very tough. But I will be supporting this project, and I look forward to seeing it come to fruition in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Troster. Councillor Tierney.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. And Councillor Curry beat me to a lot of the questions. So we've already qualified that if this went to a tribunal, like anything, it's most likely going to be going in the applicant's favor anyway. Even when staff decide to go against some applications, we haven't had success, even with an apartment tower in my area. That being said, I wanted to correct a couple of quick facts. I actually have some of the highest number of high-rise development applications in the entire city. But you notice we don't have a lot of people from my district coming here because they're very well informed and they understand we have a housing crisis. And a lot of the applications that do come in, we've been very upfront that around our transit stations is where we're making the investments. That's where you want to see people live and to decrease automobile traffic. That being said, I do hear the concerns, and I know the councilors heard the concerns firsthand, but we really are handcuffed. The province, the federal government has made it very clear. Even as council, we're still, unless something's changed in the last while, and I always like to bring this up, we're still having a housing emergency. It's about building homes. It's not about just free homes, subsidized homes. It's about getting more homes, period, so we could actually have places to live, including our children that are desperate to purchase homes and can't get into the market. So I want to thank the councillor for the hard work, and I know it's a difficult pill for a lot of the audience members, but it is the reality. So I'll be supporting this project, and certainly I hope the rest of the colleagues do as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Madam Chair again. So probably the easiest question for clarification for staff is the measurement of setbacks. Probably one of the first question a delegate raised. And just for clarity, do we measure setbacks from the property, the abutting property line, or from the building that is on that property?
Through you, Madam Chair, we always measure setback from the property line. However, the wording in the official plan speaks to a transition zone, which is not necessarily a setback. It's not a well-defined term. And as a result, the applicant is seeking an official plan amendment to create a clear and definable setback requirement for the two buildings.
So when the city measures, are we consistent with all development applications?
When we're putting rules within our zoning bylaw, yes, we're consistent. We always go from the property line.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. To Mr. Mark, a question, if I may. Reference has been made to an agreement that was signed between the local community association and I believe the church, the Unitarian Church, a number of years ago. I heard 1982 is referenced. Mr. Mark, are you aware of this agreement, and does anything in that agreement potentially impact any revised outcome that we're about to approve today?
Madam Chair, I am not aware of that agreement, and thus I can only provide a general response to the second question posed by the council, but I trust it will be sufficient. This committee and council are under the Planning Act to make decisions on the basis of planning policy and the official plan and good planning practice. Not included in that is a private agreement between parties.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you. And then back to staff. Lots of discussion about some in the community who would like to see at that second entry point off of Richmond Road. What would actually trigger staff support for such a request? Would you need certain traffic volumes to be met? Would you need the pedestrian count? What would actually need to meet criteria or a threshold for staff to say, yeah, we would support that type of request?
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you for the question. Thank you for the question, Councillor. For this particular application, the city doesn't have the authority to obligate the developer to take additional lands for this access. So we have restrictions already. So presently, right now, we reviewed the application that we had with the Cleary Lane as it met the intersection, the fully signalized intersection. And that's what we analyzed as part of our traffic impact assessment. The levels of service at that intersection were that met the traffic volumes that were being generated by the site. So we feel confident in that intersection to take the traffic volume for that site.
And the tricky point here is the Richmond Road property is private. The city does not own that. Yes, there's an agreement during the LRT construction, but I was just trying to wrap my head around are we close? Would there have to be a much larger development here for us to have a more serious conversation about that second entry point? But appreciate the work staff's done. There's also a question about the scope of analysis our emergency departments undertook when they were approached as part of, again, the access off Cleary. Can you just provide some detail? What type of reviews do they do? Do they factor response times? Do they look at volume? What exactly type of analysis do they undertake?
Through you, Madam Chair. So as part of the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application, staff always circulate our emergency services team. And typically, if they have a concern, they will voice that concern. And in this specific case, because of the large public feedback, I undertook additional check-in with our emergency services team. I did not hear a concern. However, this conversation is well suited for the site plan control process, where some of those finer details on the site circulation, entrance and access can be discussed. I'm also working on many other projects within the city, and I can confidently say that every time there's an issue, they always speak up and let us know.
Thank you. And the emergency services include fire, paramedics, and police. Is that correct?
Typically, fire would take the lead through one of their fire services engineer, and they will look at all aspects.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Councillor Kavanaugh.
I thought I'd let Councillor Lowe go first and I'll do wrap up.
Sure, no problem. Councillor Lowe.
Sure, thanks very much. Just sort of one question, I guess, respecting all the comments that Mr. Mark had provided about making it very difficult to require a third party to acquiesce. In those conversations later on, I'm sure when we're discussing that pathway that goes from Richmond Road to the property, what would that pathway probably look like based on, I guess, standard design guidelines for the city?
Through you, Madam Chair, typically a standard multi-use pathway will be 3 meter in width with some grassed area on either side for a total of between 5 to 6 meters. And we will be working with the applicant to have a dedicated pathway leading from Richmond Road through A09 Richmond, which is a Christie site, over 30 Cleary, crossing over the NCC woodland, connecting to the multi-use pathway on the parkway.
Okay, so I mean, this is a consideration that I'll just leave with you for when you're further into the site plan process. But given some of the comments about emergency access, perhaps a very slight compromise, at least between Richmond and the site, could be a pathway that's however wide a fire truck might be, whatever our widest emergency vehicle is, and you can have those swingy bollard things that one or two of my communities have in Barrhaven East that sort of serve as primary pedestrian cyclist accesses with that need if it ever arises do matter in emergency response. So if this is something that can at least shave off a few seconds for that use, then perhaps it's worth a conversation. So I'll leave that with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to all my colleagues for your questions and your interest in this topic. This is a big application, and we appreciate the Unitarian Church moving forward to bring affordable housing, particularly with the idea of working on reconciliation. That is the number one part of this application. We appreciate that, and I don't think anyone was against that at all. Everyone who spoke was not against the project, but they had specific terms that they wanted to see, and one of them was the transition. And I believe my colleagues have asked that question, but it was about the angular plane. And one of the delegations, Mr. Fraser, was asking about 20 meters being enough. Would that have been possible to have 20 meters, not 30 meters, but 20 meters? Could that have been achieved to make a more appropriate angular plane?
Madam Chair, through you, and Madam Coordinator, would you be able to pull up the staff presentation and go into the second last slide? So overall, I think staff has similar concern, right? Trying to push the building away from the existing low-rise residential area. But with the recognition that we're not working with a blank slate, there's many existing constraints on site. The building itself is currently set back 14 meter for the podium of the high-rise building. Above the 4th floor, there is another 2 meter step back and an additional 3.8 meter above the 15th story. Yeah, could we go to the second last slide, please? The site itself contains a well-defined driveway system. So if we were to push the building even further to the east, it will have some impact to the site circulation and the general logistic of the area. Within the secondary plan itself, it talks about a 30-meter transition zone. So if we take the most conservative interpretation of that, which is from the property line, the as of right building envelope of the 16th story with a 30-meter setback would currently not be in line with the 45-degree angular plane either. Staff also took note of the close proximity to the LRT station and the future plan context within the neighborhood subject to an evolving overlay. So through time, the area is supposed to morph into a denser, sort of higher density development scenario. Also with the consideration that tree protection and the protection of mature trees is another official plan objective. So with all of these things in mind, with the angling of the building, the north-south orientation allow for the minimal amount of shadow impact, the existing neighborhood context with a really, really deep rear yard providing that extra buffer. Staff took a lot of effort also to work with the applicant to ensure that the mature landscape buffer on the western rear yard can be preserved. I think the applicant team talked about their shoring strategy of blind form pouring to not further encroach onto that area. Staff above and beyond also requested securities to ensure the succession of those trees and the retaining of that buffer to help achieve that appropriate transition. So if we can go to a couple of slides down, the applicant team did produce a as of right visioning document based on the secondary plan. So if we can keep going down a couple of slides, 2 more down.
That's it.
Oh, so I think, sorry, it must be a different version. But basically they produced a design which showcased what can be built on the site without any official plan amendment. And the result was that because of the large size of the site, subject to the 30-meter setback, there could be 3 apartment buildings of 16 stories in height. And whether the visual impact by assessing it through Island Avenue or the privacy impact or the shadowing impact, there's no noticeable difference between the 6 and the 16-story proposal being a little bit closer versus the 3-tower proposal. So with all those things in mind, staff thought it was appropriate with the current setup and the setup of the Unitarian campus to have the 2 buildings located where they are.
That's interesting. 16-story buildings, 3 16-story buildings could have been built as of right. Okay, so I think that's interesting to know. One of the questions that came up, concerns, is the walkway location. The developer talked about it being very minor, that this is the walkway in the green zone, in the buffer zone. I don't know if you have any comments. It's a site plan question, but can there be negotiations on that to ensure that it's not meant to be a major throughway for walking?
Yeah, absolutely, Madam Chair. Staff will continue that discussion as part of the site plan process. We are collecting securities for the protection of the trees. So the vision is for those boardwalk not to be impacting any existing mature vegetation and for the development to add additional buffering as part of the site plan process.
Thank you. I was just talking to Mr. Mark, and Councillor Brockington was asking him about the previous agreement, which I'm very familiar with, from 40 years ago or more, and its status. He was not. I had asked that specifically to planning staff, and I just want to get your response on it.
That's correct. We checked with a different legal solicitor at the city, and the original zoning bylaw is no longer in place, likely since amalgamation. And any private agreement between the residents and the Unitarian Church is a private matter between 2 private entities. However, staff have really tried hard to ensure that the green buffer is maintained and respected. And that's included as part of the holding provision through the zoning bylaw.
Okay, thank you. The gardens, that was a very special part to the campus for the Unitarian Church, but it was thought they could be moved. And one of the reasons it was said that they couldn't be moved was because of trees. I just wanted to get what staff's reaction to that is, because are trees being saved by having that garden there, or could it have been relocated?
I'm not a forester, but the size of the trees there would not be suitable for relocation. So if the buildings need to be built where the garden is, the trees would need to be removed.
Okay, so we'd lose trees. Okay, just wanted to get that. Okay, I think I've covered everything. It's been a lot. It's been a couple of years since we've had these conversations, and I think I should remind my colleagues that during that time, the rules changed, that we had more provisions put on us by the province. During that time, the rules changed in terms of, once an application got put in, that the clock was ticking, that we had only a certain amount of time where we had to have these meetings. So that is why we, and I appreciate the applicant knowing this was coming, that we had most of our meetings before the application went in, which is suitable since that means there's flexibility and no decisions have been hard and fast. And that's part of the reason we got the parking garage entrance moved, because it hadn't been put in yet. The application hadn't been put in yet. So I think that there was a learning curve on because we're just starting on this process. This is new. There's only been a handful. I don't know, is this the first one under the new rules, or not quite, but no, there's been a few, but it's a learning curve, and things have changed. I know that the community, for example, has pushed back against applications before and gone to the OLT, but now we know that can't be done, because you can't have third parties there. So much has changed. And I appreciate them coming out today. I appreciate all the delegations that came out today. Their concern is having a safe place and having livable places. And that's on both for the Woodruff North community, want to keep it livable, and same with the actual campus with the Unitarian House. And I think a lot of the concerns that were raised as health issues are about healthy living and making it a place to be livable. The safety concerns, as has been already said, the second entrance doesn't meet the criteria for a second entrance by our city's definition, but we have to go out of our way, and hopefully that can be done through site plan to make it as safe and as livable and walkable as possible. So I appreciate all the efforts of staff, and I expect that you'll be working very closely with the applicant on those measures, because that has been obviously made the top priority. Again, I want to thank the community. I know this isn't easy, but I want to thank them for coming out and raising their concerns. They want to see trees preserved. That was their top concern. They want to see green, and that's happening. So anyway, I want to thank everybody for their participation in this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. I'm not seeing any more hands. I just wanted to thank everyone who came out today. I think despite some concern and disagreement about the components of the site, there was agreement that this is a needed project that is very aligned with many of our goals as a city. So I want to thank everyone for the respectful dialogue. We appreciate the concerns that you brought forward, and I think respect the heavy lift by the ward councillor, who's going to continue to work with staff and the applicant. So is this item carried? Great. Thank you, everyone. So moving on, we have no in-camera items. Do we have any notices of motion? Seeing none, do we have any inquiries? Seeing none, there is no other business. We are adjourned. The next meeting is Wednesday, September 11th. Thanks, everyone.